Chapter 248. Garen was already in an extremely miserable state. The most valiant warrior of the Zaku tribe was already covered in blood, along with the other Zaku warriors behind him. All of them had wounds all over their bodies. After they arrived at the underground cave's jungle, they were suddenly attacked by a group of metal-devouring ants. It has to be said that their luck was much worse than Sheya's, because the place where they were attacked was relatively close to the ants' nest on the hillside. As a result, they didn't have time to escape and were trapped here. Garen almost died in the swarm of ants, but fortunately, he ignited a fire and then jumped into the fire to roll a few times, luckily snatching his life back. However, he did not know how many places his body was bitten, especially by a metal-devouring ant that bit the corner of his eye, almost turning him into a one-eyed man. At this moment, he squinted his one eye. The wound on the corner of his eye was full of blood. His blurred vision looked at the place where Sheya was standing in the distance, and seeing the scene, Garen was suddenly scared out of his wits. He saw Sheya standing on a big tree, suddenly being enveloped by a dark cloud from afar, followed by a painful cry from Sheya. With a plop sound, he fell down from a high place, directly falling into the swarm of ants on the ground. "It's over. That outsider is dead." At this moment, such a thought flashed through Garen's mind. Before setting out, the war chief had warned him that this outsider was the most important person to kill the serpent. Although the proud Garen's heart was quite disdainful of these outsiders, and although Sheya's strength looked very strong, but Garen was the strongest warrior of the Zaku tribe, he did not think that this outsider was much stronger than himself. But Garen believed in the war chief's wisdom and orders. Since the war chief said that this outsider was the key person, then he must be the key person. At this moment, seeing Sheya fall into the swarm of ants, was there still a way to survive? After Sheya's weight of more than 100 pounds fell into the ant swarm, the black mass of ants immediately pounced on him. Originally, Zucker's warriors couldn't bear to look anymore, fearing that the end of this outsider, but at this time, a red light suddenly flashed, and with a bang, the swarm of ants scattered. Sheya's whole body was covered in red light, and he stood up from the ground. The appearance of a country bumpkin was extremely embarrassing. His clothes were bitten open, at least hundreds of small bite marks on his skin, half of his body was covered in blood. But in a hurry, the crimson murderous aura burst out, his whole body emitting a dazzling red light. Metal-devouring ants were most afraid of light, especially for some unknown reason. The crimson murderous aura on Sheya's body made the swarm of ants extremely afraid, as if they were afraid and scattered, suddenly clearing an open space on the ground. Sheya took a few big strides, ran to the side, and waved the fire fork in his hand. With a crack, a branch as thick as his waist was directly cut down from a big tree. The branch was full of branches and leaves, and was 4 or 5 meters long. Sheya put the fire fork back in his waist, hugged such a big trunk, and then with an imposing manner, rushed to the besieged Zaku warriors. The red light on his body forced the swarm of ants to retreat, and the thick trunk immediately poked into the fire of the huge mushroom. Soon, the huge trunk in his hand began to burn, and the branches and leaves were all on fire. Sheya was holding a huge fire torch of 4 or 5 meters long in his hand. This became a big killing weapon to deal with ants. Only an abnormally strong monster like him could do something like this. When he swung such a big thing in a circle, the 4 to 5 meter long fire torch scared the ants so much that they couldn't help but retreat. Like the waves of the sea, they rolled to the sides and instantly cleared out a large area of empty space. "Come down. Let's get out of here." There was no need for Sheya to say anything as Garen had already seen the opportunity. He shouted and jumped down with many Jack warriors. Sheya raised his invincible might and began to dance with the huge torch. Garen and others followed closely behind him, gathering into a group. The group was surrounded by layers of ants, and although they had the torch to open a path, it was still difficult to walk. The retreat of the swarm of ants gradually slowed down, as too many ants rushed here. Everyone's walking speed was slow, and in the forest, although the 4 or 5 meter long fire torch was a big killing weapon, it was somewhat difficult to use. Several times, the ants rushed into the fire circle, causing the Zaku warriors to suffer. Shea himself was also suffering unspeakably. Although his strength was great, the damned torch in his hand was at least a few hundred jin. After swinging it back and forth for a long time, his strength was naturally somewhat lacking. Moreover, he was originally injured today, and had used dragon thrust once, so he had not fully recovered. He could only barely walk a few hundred meters before his arm felt sore, and the huge torch could not be swung anymore. In the sky there was an endless buzzing sound, and groups of dark clouds could be seen flying around like a swarm of bees. These were flying ants, and these flying ants were half the size of ordinary gold-devouring ant. However, they had 2 slender wings, and when groups of them flew over, it really made people feel cold. Moreover, these little things were more cunning than ordinary ants, and more aggressive. Although the torch was swung in a circle, with so many people, it was impossible to cover all of them. There would always be some flying ants that would rush into the circle, wrap around a person, and crazily bite a few times. This distance of several hundred meters was practically a road of blood, and the Zaku warriors were bitten until their flesh was lacerated. With a blood-curdling scream, another Zaku warrior was wrapped around by the flying ants, and immediately fell to the ground and rolled around in pain. The people around him were not able to take care of him, and they could only watch as that guy rolled into the ant pile, and in a moment, disappeared. What was even more frightening was that Garen and the others did not know how they came to this place, but they actually had iron weapons on them. The Zaku warrior who fell into the ant pile also had an iron spear on him. In the end, that iron spear was immediately torn apart by the countless ants. It was as if melted. It was already so difficult to walk a distance of several hundred meters. If he wanted to rush from here to a place with water, he was afraid that the hope was slim. Shea calculated in his heart, but there was nothing he could do. He was already unable to carry the torch. Even if his heart was a bit evil at this moment, and he abandoned everyone and ran away, he wouldn't be able to learn how to jump like a monkey like when he first came here. Damn, could it be that he was going to die in this place? If he was eaten by these things, not even dregs would be left. Just when Shea's heart had sunk to the bottom of the valley, suddenly, he heard a shout in the distance. "Master! I'm coming!" Todoro's voice came from the sky. But, Todoro? That cowardly guy. Shea first thought that he was hallucinating, but when he looked up, he was suddenly invigorated. In the darkness in the distance, a light came flying from afar. In midair, Todoro was flying. He was sitting on the flying magic carpet that Merlin had given him. Todoro sat on the magic carpet with the witch doctor beside him. He held the magic staff in his hand, and the moon-white light on the top of the magic staff illuminated the way forward. Todoro saw Shea below from afar and shouted at the top of his voice. In midair, the witch doctor raised her magic staff and waved it. Suddenly, with a bang, the light became several times stronger, forming a huge ball of light. As the ball of light approached, the surrounding flying ants immediately retreated and dissipated. The witch doctor waved her arms and threw out lumps of glowing powder. It was unknown what it was, but once the powder was scattered, it immediately scattered a bright light. With the light opening the way, Todoro drove the magic carpet to where Shea and the others were. Todoro praised loudly, "Great Sir Merlin, all right. Let's not bother about this disgusting magic spell to control the magic carpet for the time being." Todoro stopped moving the magic carpet. Sitting on it, he stretched out his hand and said, "Master, hurry up and get up." Shea quickly tossed away the torch. After getting up, he looked at the magic carpet. The carpet could not fit more than 10 people. He quickly extended his hand toward Garen and said, "Pull me." Everyone, Pull the person beside you. Let's leave this place. Although Garen did not understand Shea's words, given the current situation, he understood what Shea meant. As a result, the many Zakus pulled one person after another. Like a string of gourds, the magic carpet flew up and they held hands as they hung in mid-air. The magic treasure created by Merlin was truly miraculous. Despite the weight of so many people, it was still able to handle it. Only, its speed was greatly reduced. Todoro's face was filled with excitement and he shouted, "Great Sir Merlin, grant us the power to fly." Shouting all the way, the magic carpet took a long line of people and flew unsteadily into the distance. The group of flying ants behind them were intimidated by the light and did not dare to approach. They just followed closely behind. With the help of the magic carpet, they quickly reached the river. Everyone jumped into the river with a splash. The magic light of the witch doctor could not last long. After everyone jumped into the water, Todoro put away the magic carpet and folded it into the size of a handkerchief before falling into the water. Once the light disappeared, the group of flying ants immediately swept over. Everyone had no choice but to dive into the water. Hiding under the water, they could clearly see the terrifying scene of the group of flying ants skimming over the wave. Those annoying flying ants circled back and forth, unwilling to retreat. Everyone held their breath and waited bitterly in the water for a long time. Gradually, they could not hold it in any longer. However, as soon as someone poked their head out to breathe, they were immediately bitten by the flying ants. After retreating into the water, they were immediately dyed red. Shea's swimming skills were average, but his body was strong. Naturally, he could hold his breath for a much longer time than others. However, when he looked in the water, he saw that the witch doctor was right beside him. The witch doctor was still wearing a mask, but a string of bubbles appeared on her face. The pair of eyes behind the mask had rolled over. Obviously, she could not hold on any longer. Shea immediately swam over and grabbed the witch doctor. He then lifted the lower edge of the witch doctor's mask to reveal a small mouth. Shea did not care so much and immediately put his mouth on it. The witch doctor's body was obviously shocked. Her eyes suddenly widened and she stared at Shea. Shea took a breath and the witch doctor's eyes gradually lit up. She instinctively began to inhale. Shea's breath was sucked in by the witch doctor, but he could not hold it in any longer. The witch doctor regained her spirit and gently pushed Shea away. Her eyes were still cold and indifferent, but under the water, the way she looked at Shea could not help but be a little more strange. Seeing that the country bumpkin was strangling her throat and desperately trying to hold it in, the witch doctor suddenly felt around in her arms and took out a thin bamboo tube. Then, the bamboo tube shallowly extended a little out of the water and pulled Shea over and held the bamboo tube in her mouth. Shea had never experienced such a feeling in his life. It turned out that being able to breathe was such a happy thing. After the problem of breathing was solved, Shea looked to the side. Many of the Zakus had taken out similar bamboo tubes and began to breathe like the witch doctor. Damn, these Zakus are really weird. Shea was muttering in his heart when he suddenly heard a sentence in his mind. This sentence, of course, was said by Dora. The female dragon's voice was full of resentment. "Boy, I'll make a deal with you. You push that bastard out now. I'll teach you an incomparably powerful skill. The true unique skill of the ancient Dragon Knight. Dragon destruction." Bastard? Was there a need to ask? The bastard, that Dora said. Who else could it be but Ada? Of course, the country bumpkin chose to ignore such words. After all, the patience of these terrible insects was limited. After hovering here for a long time, they finally dispersed and fled far away. When it was safe, the group of people under the water could not wait to poke their bodies out one by one, crying out and gasping desperately for breath. Todoro was about to faint. He stuck out his tongue and vomited. Shea had already gone over and hugged the guy. He tightened his arms tightly and patted the magician a few times on the back. "Good boy. Thank you. If it weren't for you, I would be dead." Then, without waiting for Todoro to speak, Shea had already waded through the water and came to Ada's side. The handsome blond man looked at Shea quietly. There was an inexplicable calmness in his eyes. He even grinned at Shea and then said lightly, "Hello, we meet again." Shea looked at the humanoid dragon. Just as he was about to say something, "Do you want to ask me why am I here?" Ada spoke first. His tone was very infuriating. "Unfortunately, I won't tell you." Shea. He suddenly recalled the first time he met this humanoid dragon. This guy was buried in the ground with only his head exposed. After he rescued him, this guy showed no gratitude at all. His expression was cold and indifferent. In fact, in order to talk back to him, he did not hesitate to jump back into the pit and was willing to be buried alive by him again. This is a very smart and dangerous guy. Shea reminded himself. "All right, I won't ask this question." Shea snorted and suppressed his anger. "Do you have any way to get us out of here? Other things can wait until we get out of here." Ada's expression was calm. He looked at Shea for a while and smiled. However, this abominable guy turned his head and looked at the witch doctor. "It's been a long time, respected witch doctor." Ada smiled in a very friendly manner. He stood in the water and nodded his head at Ada. Then, he raised his hands to his chest and bowed respectfully. "Yes, it's been a long time, respected Mr. Darwin." Shea was quick to recall. This Darwin seemed to be very familiar with the Zaku people. That was what he had heard from that little girl, Suling. Darwin, dragon, honored guest of the Zaku people. Demandra's cave. No matter what, there must be a special reason for this fellow to appear here. The good news is, this place is a magic array. The crystal ball above our heads is the light source here. The magic circle is buried deep underground. I don't know how the things that built this place did it, but according to what I know, it's impossible to find a magic circle here. However, based on what I know, this magic array uses the magma underground to absorb fire elemental magic to maintain the magic array's operation. The magic array will operate every 6 hours and the crystal ball above our heads will be replenished with magic power and light up again. Every cycle will last for 6 hours and this place will turn dark again. This is a place that simulates the cycle of day and night. In other words, according to the calculation of time, as long as we hide in the river for 6 hours at most, the sky will turn bright. Then, the swarm of ants will return to their nest, and we will be safe for the time being. Darwin spoke with fervor and assurance. His tone was as calm as ever. However, he turned to look at Shea and said, "Do not ask me how I know that. I will not answer." Shea stared with widened eyes. Darwin made the same expression he had when he first jumped into the pit. "You can choose to throw me ashore right now, but will you do that?" "No." Shea shook his head helplessly. It was not easy to find someone who was familiar with this place. Perhaps they would need him to help them escape. "Very well, now I will tell you the bad news." Darwin sighed and said, "Originally, there was only one entrance here." He turned to look at Shea and said, "You do not have any iron equipment or armor on you. You must have entered from that entrance. There is a magic array there." "Naturally, I am talking about originally. For some unknown reason, perhaps due to the passage of time, some changes to the ground or an earthquake, at any rate, a new passageway has appeared here. It is a crack. I think Garen and the others may have entered from there. I also met them in the forest. However, according to Garen, they cannot leave from the place they entered from. It is a crack and they fell down. It is impossible for them to go up from there. So, Shea suddenly thought of something and said, "When I was coming in, I walked past a door. The door was blocked by a shield. Did you place the shield there?" Ada turned to look at Shea and said something even more infuriating. "What do you think, blockhead? Could the shield walk on its own? First, let me be thick-skinned and ask for your votes, then let me be thick-skinned and say, Tomorrow is Saturday, so I might not be able to update. I want to inform everyone in advance. If I am unable to update tomorrow, then on Sunday I will write 10,000 word. That is how it is. Everyone, please calm down. Dance with your hands on your head. Everyone, please hit not my face. To be continued. If you want to know what happened next, please go to www.chidian.com. There are more chapters. Support the author. Support the original reading. Chapter 249. Shea suddenly realized that Ada had not changed at all. This guy always had a way to make him speechless, and his beautiful face could always inspire him to work harder. However, he could not do much to this guy. After the ant swarm dispersed, everyone finally came to the riverbank. However, for safety reasons, no one dared to go too far from the riverbank. Everyone started a fire. After knowing that these terrible gold-devouring ants were afraid of all light, starting a fire became the safest choice. Surrounding the warm fire, everyone dried their clothes. The warm flame and the light of the fire gave everyone a sense of security. Garen and the witch doctor engaged in a fierce argument. It could be seen that Garen's mood was very agitated. The Jack warrior leader's voice was loud, and there was some dissatisfaction and anger in his tone. However, he still looked cold and indifferent from the beginning. Shea didn't understand their language, so he naturally didn't know what they were arguing about. However, from Garen's eyes that kept looking at Ada when he was shouting, he could confirm that the Zaku's argument had something to do with Ada. Obviously, the Zaku people had some opinions about Ada's appearance here. Shea knew that Ada was a distinguished guest of the Zaku tribe. Moreover, Ada seemed to have a deep personal relationship with the war chief. That girl Sulan said that Ada was her teacher, and every year he would stay in the Zaku tribe for a period of time. From this point of view, Ada and the Zaku tribe's relationship was quite close. However, even if there was a close relationship, Ada's appearance in this place, the forbidden area of the Zaku tribe, still made the Zaku people very suspicious. Shea could see this from the witch doctor's gaze. This witch doctor didn't seem to be very enthusiastic about Ada. She even occasionally glanced at Ada with a somewhat gloomy and cold expression. The quarrel between Garen and the witch doctor did not end well. Shea then interrupted their quarrel. At Shea's request, Garen narrated the experience of his group after they parted ways with everyone. Garen's narration was still translated and relayed by the translator. According to Garen, after he and his subordinates entered the mysterious sealed door, they did not reach the place where Shea and the others had previously visited, where a large number of specimens were stored. After Garen and the rest entered the revolving door, they entered a warehouse. The word warehouse came from Garland. According to his description, it was an underground cave filled with all kinds of things. It was a huge sealed room, and there were a lot of metal objects piled up inside. According to his description, Shea immediately perked up. This was because from Garen's description and Shea's own guesses, the warehouse was filled with a large number of weapons. The weapon of the ancient gnomes. Magic cannon? Demonic fire? What else? In addition, Garen explained that there were a lot of strange stones piled up in that place. He was unable to identify what those stones were. However, from his description, Todoro raised a possibility. Those could be magic crystals. The magician frowned as he thought hard. Sounds like a large number of magic crystals, after the magic power has been exhausted. The magician quickly pulled out an item from his chest. It was a magic ring that had exhausted its magic power. On top of it was a small piece of crystal. After Garen looked at it, he immediately confirmed, it was this kind of thing. According to his description, the warehouse was filled with magic crystals piled up like a mountain. Garen and his men, after entering the warehouse, had the same reaction as Shea and the rest. They were unable to leave through the original path, so they could only look for another way out. They found another door in the warehouse, That door was open. After that, they left through that door and went through a long underground tunnel. In the end of the tunnel collapsed. Perhaps it was because of an earthquake or some other unforeseen event. After the tunnel collapsed, they found a crack after the collapse. They fell through the crack and directly fell into this damned place. I don't understand. Our two groups of people used the same door. The knob was also turned to the scale of the red moon, but why did we take different routes? Shea deliberately sighed in distress. However, the cunning country bumpkin, intentionally or otherwise, glanced at Ada. Ada snorted and coldly glanced at Shea. This guy's tone was cold. If you want to ask a question, why don't you just say it directly? I won't tell you the reason why I am here. Other than that, I don't mind sharing some other news with you. Shea's spirit was immediately lifted. After all, he was still very confident in this humanoid dragon. He had fully experienced Ada's prowess when they first met. Ada took a stick and lit it on the bonfire. Then, he walked to the riverbank and started drawing on the ground. First of all, you have to understand that the place we are in now is an underground cave. This place was built by a powerful race in ancient times. Saying this, Ada glanced at Shea. You don't look surprised. It seems you already know this? Yes. Ancient gnomes? Shea nodded. Correct. Ada retracted his gaze. Now I can answer the first question in your heart. The outermost door of this place has some special equipment. The knobs on the door you saw can send people to different places through different scales. But we were all transferred to the Red Moon. Shea quickly described his experience. Ada looked at Shea and sighed. Sigh. I really can't understand the limited wisdom of you humans, however. He still answered Shea's question. Your initial guess is correct. The scale of the Red Moon is the ancient gnomes' unit of record. According to the ancient gnomes' calendar, they called the third day of every month Red Moon Day. Therefore, the Red Moon, in the eyes of the ancient gnomes, represented the number 3. The first time you turned the knob to Red Moon, it meant that you opened the door to warehouse number 3. In other words, Garen and the others entered warehouse number 3. Do you understand? Shea nodded. But, when you turned the knob to Red Moon for the second time, you made a mistake. You didn't reset the number to 0. Therefore, when you turn the knob back to the starting point and rotate it to the Red Moon scale, it is equivalent to you opening the 333 door. 2 3s. Do you understand? Shea was stunned. Reset? How? It's very simple. After you open a door, you don't need to touch the knob. After a while, it will automatically return to its original position. That is how you reset it to 0. Shea stared with widened eyes. How do you know these things? I just know. Ada rolled his eyes. His reply was still the kind of hateful tone that made people gnash their teeth in anger. Shea suppressed the urge to throw a punch at Ada. He took a deep breath and looked at the fellow before him. So, how much do you know about this place? Ada smiled. His smile was enigmatic. Much more than you can imagine. The two of them stood by the riverbank. At that moment, Ada turned around to look at the Zakus beside the bonfire. Ada hesitated for a moment before lowering his voice. All right, Shea. Although meeting you here was not part of my plan, I think you might be able to provide me with some help. You and those Zakus came here for their holy snake, didn't you? Ada's smile contained a hint of mockery. That is not hard to guess. I know the Zaku's attitude towards their sacred snake very well. It seems, the last time I met you, you were just a demon hunter. This time, you are working as a mercenary? Did you accept the request of these Zakus to help them kill the big snake? This guess was basically correct. Shea did not deny it. He looked at Ada and asked, What are you trying to say? We can work together. Ada's smile was very bright. However, the look in his eyes made Shea's hair stand. If you are going to wander around here, I can guarantee that you will not be able to find the big snake even if you wander around here for a few months. But I can help you find the way. What do you want? Snake eggs. Ada smiled. 10 snake eggs. I'm not asking for much. At this point, Shea had two choices. The first choice was to tie up this abominable fellow and interrogate him. He would pry open his mouth and obtain everything he wanted to know. However, imagine what Ada had experienced in the past. This humanoid dragon was definitely one of the top 3 most intelligent individuals that Shea had encountered in his life. The first time he met him, he was buried alive by a few magicians. The result? The magicians who buried him alive were led into the mountains to slay the dragon. In the end, all of them were wiped out. Furthermore, he had a grudge against Dora. Dora was much more powerful than him. However, Ada had endured for many years, lurking in the mountain where Dora was hiding. After surveying the surroundings, he deliberately released news about Dora, sending several magicians to their deaths as cannon fodder. In the end, Dora died. And this Ada was still alive and kicking. Therefore, Shea immediately dismissed the idea of falling out with Ada. Then the second choice was very simple. Well, let's work together. Shea looked a little reluctant. But let me make one thing clear. If you trick me again this time, like last time, you tricked me into opening the way and walking through the fire-breathing swamp. If you dare to do this again, I will break your neck first. Don't worry, I will let you live safely. Ada looked at the Zakus and seemed to smile. I still need you to protect me. Although the Zakus have not done anything to me now, I can guarantee that once we get out of here, they will immediately capture me and bring me back to the tribe. After all, I trespassed on their forbidden land. At that time, I need you to keep me safe. Shea rolled his eyes. Deal. Both of them had smiles on their faces, but in their smiles, they both looked like they had ulterior motives. After resting for about 4 hours, Shea announced that everyone would continue to move. We have a new guide. Shea pointed to Ada. He can take us to find the sacred snake. Ada stood beside Shea, his face calm. Ignoring the puzzled eyes of the Zakus, he directly said in the Zaku's language, I don't want to waste time to explain the doubts in your hearts. I can only guarantee one thing. I can help you find the big snake. I know where it is hiding. So, if there are any other questions, we can discuss them after we get out. Garen did not speak. He glanced at the witch doctor and stared at Ada for a while before nodding. Well, let's do that. The first step is for everyone to clean up the things on your body. Throw away all the ironware. Throw it all away. Shea said mainly to Garen and the others. There was no objection to this, because they had already told Garen and the others that in this place, if they carried ironware on their body, it would attract the attack of the metal-devouring ants. Anyway, in the forest, the Zakus did not lack weapons. Soon everyone cut out a pile of tree spears. Garen even found a few pieces of stone with similar shapes by the river bank and tied them to tree sticks with ropes to make a few stone axes. After all the ironware was thrown into the river, everyone waited for a while. Finally, when the 6 hours were up, a red light flashed at the top of the cave. Then, the red light quickly gathered in the huge crystal ball. Suddenly, the crystal ball burst out with a strong light, like a burning fireball, illuminating the entire cave. Okay. It's daylight now. Let's set off, the direction is through that hill. Shea pointed to the front, and suddenly everyone's face changed. Don't worry, it's now daytime here. The habit of the metal-devouring ants is that they will not move out in broad daylight, unless there are metal objects to lure them. As long as we throw away all the ironware on our body, even if we walk to the bottom of the hill, those things will not come out. Of course, unless you crawl into the ant hole yourself, ha! Shea pretended to be heroic and laughed a few times. He had just saved the lives of Garen and a group of Zakus last night, so everyone had a good impression of this guy. Under Shea's encouragement, the Zakus gathered their courage and loudly shouted a few times. Walking through the forest was not difficult, but when they approached the hill, everyone was still somewhat nervous. Even the most courageous Shea could not help but have a strange expression. At this time, Ada walked in front of everyone. This guy seemed to be very confident. When they went around the hill, everyone saw a scene that made their scalps go numb. This tens of meters high hill was simply a giant ant's nest. Shea even suspected that the entire hill had been eaten clean by the ants. On the surface of the hill, one could see large mounds of graves. Every mound was about 1 to 2 meters high. These mounds of soil were roughly every 10 steps or so. The entire surface of the hill was densely packed with these things. Under Shea's reminder, everyone deliberately walked around the mounds of soil, not daring to touch them. Everyone even subconsciously lightened their footstep. When they finally went around the hill, everyone breathed a sigh of relief. Even Shea himself was no exception. After passing through the forest, they arrived at the other end of the cave. The mountain wall here was smooth, like a crystal that emitted a soft glow. Faint ripples of light seemed to be flowing through it. Shockingly, there was a passageway beneath the mountain wall. Unfortunately, this passageway had already been blocked. Countless rocks had collapsed, blocking the passageway without leaving any gap. Where is the way? Shea looked at Ada beside him. Under the water. Ada looked very confident. Although the passageway here has been blocked, don't forget about the river in this cave. Haven't you thought about it? This water is running water. If it was still water, after 10,000 years, and with the fire element that ignites the underground magma every 6 hours, the water would have been dried up long ago. The only reason why this water could be maintained for 10,000 years without drying up is that this water is alive. There is an undercurrent under the water. As he spoke, Ada pointed at the river in front of them. The water here has 2 openings. One is the entrance and the other is the exit. This is the entrance, but we have to be careful. According to what I know, there is a magic array under the entrance. Every 6 hours, it will activate a magic array to pour the water from the undercurrent in to maintain the amount of water in this cave. When the water is pouring in, the pressure under the water is very strong. Therefore, we have to calculate the time accurately. When the water is calm, we can swim out of this undercurrent. I have calculated that we need about 15 minutes to swim out of this undercurrent and reach the other exit. Shea was angry. 15 minutes? Damn it. What do you think we are? Fish? Do you think we can stay underwater for a quarter of an hour without breathing? Ada laughed. He looked at Shea and quietly waited for Shea to vent his anger. This guy seemed to have a good temper. Do you think I will do something boring? Why don't you think about it? Since I can calculate such an accurate diving time, I must have tried it myself. Shea's eyes suddenly lit up. He knew that although he did not know how strong Ada was before he turned into a human, at least Ada was in human form now. Moreover, he had the body of an ordinary human with not much strength. Since he could dive for more than 15 minutes, then Ada took out an item from his pocket. It was a round bead. It looked like a pearl, but its color was slightly muddy and it was not very eye-catching. However, when Todoro saw this item, he immediately exclaimed, "Water avoidance bead! Heavens! Is this a water avoidance bead? Look, Shea. Your servant is more knowledgeable than you." Ada continued to attack Shea without batting an eyelid. Shea looked at Todoro angrily. The magician immediately shrunk his neck. When I was studying in the Magic Academy, there was one time when the Dean of the Magic Academy gave us a lecture. He showed us this treasure. This is a high-level water magic tool. How strange, Mr. Darwin. The one in your hand is the same size as the one I saw that year. Ada laughed. Adorable Mr. Todoro, you did not see wrongly. This is the one you saw. Todoro's mouth opened wide. He swallowed his saliva. How is that possible? The dean treats this like a treasure. How could it be with you? If I say he gave it to me, would you believe me? Ada seemed to have no intention of paying attention to Shea. Instead, he stood by the water and extended his hand to make a please gesture. He smiled amiably. Who will come down first and follow me? The water avoidance bead did not look very eye-catching, but when Shea saw it in action with his own eyes, he was really shocked. When the group of people jumped into the water with Ada, they did not feel any water at all. Once the water avoidance bead came into contact with the water waves were immediately repelled by an invisible force. With Ada as the center, a waterless space of about 5 to 6 meters in diameter appeared underwater. It was as if there was an invisible wall around, blocking all the water outside. When Shea stood beside Ada and was underwater, he took a deep breath and looked around curiously for a long time. Is it magical? Ada rolled his eyes. Yes. Do you like it? Do you want it? Ada sighed. Ada smiled and looked at Shea. When we get out, I'll give it to you. After all, I don't need this in the future. Shea immediately looked at this guy vigilantly. What are you planning? Ada sighed as if he was dissatisfied. Shea, no matter what, we are old friends. Think about it carefully. When we worked together before, did I ever harm you? Of course you did. Ada snorted. I harmed you? What did I harm you? You got dragon bones, dragon scales and dragon blood. You got so many benefits. Isn't it the result of my guidance? Shea was speechless. The waterless space of 5 to 6 meters could barely accommodate the group of nearly 20 people. Everyone surrounded Ada tightly and slowly moved forward underwater. As Ada said, there was indeed an undercurrent passage under the water. The undercurrent below was very wide. The surrounding cave walls had become very smooth due to the erosion of the water over the years. Although the light was very dim, it was enough to illuminate the way forward after the witch doctor lit up her magic staff. The terrain under the waterway was very winding. Everyone walked underwater for a full quarter of an hour. Ada's calculation of time was very accurate. When the time was up, Wu ran in front of the waterway opened up. After everyone floated to the surface, they immediately saw that they had left the previous cave and arrived at another place. Bones. The entire cavern was filled with skeletons. The air in the cave was turbid and filled with an indescribable stench. When everyone floated to the surface, they could not help but cover their noses. Before they could walk to the shore, a few Zakus could not help but vomit on the surface of the water. Shea's face was pale and his chest was stuffy. Waves of nausea surged up and it took a lot of effort to suppress it. Damn it! What is this smell? Can't you see? Ada sneered and pointed to the bones in the cave. It's these. Liao Liao raised her magic staff and walked to the shore. With the help of the light in her hand, everyone could not help but change their expressions when they saw the shape of the bones on the ground. Clearly, these skeletons belonged to humans. There was no doubt that they were human, because the shape of the bones, especially the shape of the skull, was enough to prove this point. What surprised Jia the most was that these skeletons didn't seem to be very old. Many of the bones had not even completely rotted. Moreover, all the bones looked very slender and small. It's a snake woman. Liao Liao raised her magic staff and suddenly whispered this sentence. Snake woman? Shea was shocked. He immediately recalled the tragic fate of the snake women in the Zaku's tribe. These snake women, some of them were not chosen during the selection process and would end up as food for the holy snake and other small snakes. Even those who were chosen to become snake women would be responsible for taking care of the hatchlings after the snake hatches. One day, they would also end up as food for the snake. Everyone be careful. Shea warned them with a heavy voice. Since there were so many skeletons here, it was likely that there was no need for Shea to warn them. Thanks to the light in her hand, everyone was able to clearly see the surrounding walls. The walls of the cave were filled with holes of various sizes. After everyone walked to the surface of the water, sounds could be heard coming from the holes. In the dim light, they could vaguely see that there were tens of holes of various sizes on the walls. Many of the holes had triangular heads poking out from them. Snake heads poked out from the holes. Some opened their mouths, some flicked their tongues. Pairs of green eyes peeped at the crowd below the cave. Soon, many snakes slithered out from the holes and slowly slid down the walls. There were at least 20 to 30 snakes. These snakes were of different sizes. Fortunately, they were not as big as the one Shea had seen in the gnome tribe. The largest snake here was only 5 to 6 meters long. The smallest. Shea noticed that the smallest snake did not look any different from ordinary snake. Some were only as thick as his wrist. Seeing so many snakes coming out, it immediately caused a burst of exclamation. Garen shouted a few times. Under his command, the Zakus quickly formed a circle. They held their spears and vigilantly stared at the snakes surrounding them. The spears were like a forest. These snakes seemed to have sensed the hostility of the humans. They did not immediately rush forward. Instead, they slowly approached from the surroundings. Some stuck their heads out to test the waters. However, before the spears of the Zakus could reach them, they retracted their heads. The snakes were getting closer and closer. Shea stood there with a flaming fork in his hand. He shouted angrily, "Ada, do you have any ideas?" He looked back and found that Ada had run away at some unknown time. Raising his head, he saw a scene that made him furious. Ada, that bastard, was not in the circle of Zakus. He had walked far away to the wall and sat down. He was sitting beside the snakes. This fellow was leisurely leaning against the wall, looking at Shea. He sighed, "Idiot, why are you asking me? Aren't you here to kill these things? Don't you have your own plans?" The snakes slithered around Ada's body. However, they did not seem to have any intention of attacking Ada. Shea's heart suddenly moved as he remembered an important matter. Same kind. These snakes were all low-level Demandras. Although Ada was in human form, he had the soul of a dragon after all. Thus, because these low-level Demandras did not possess intelligence, they could only instinctively identify Ada based on their senses. They mistakenly thought that Ada was their own kind. Didn't he experience a similar situation in the past? "Garen!" Shea shouted, "Don't attack first. Everyone, back off. Get close to me. Everyone, get close to me." He immediately shouted at Garen a few times. Garen was already sweating profusely. After listening, he immediately commanded Jack's warriors to gather around Shea, and the formation became more and more flat. "No, if we kill the small snakes here, the sacred snake will quickly awaken." Garen anxiously shouted into Shea's ear. The witch doctor raised her magic staff. Her other hand suddenly lifted up the hem of her robe, revealing a round and smooth thigh. Under the dim light, the witch doctor's long legs were filled with beauty. However, she did not seem to care how tempting such a scene was in the eyes of others. Tied around the witch doctor's thigh was a leather pouch. This leather pouch was filled with thin bamboo tubes as thick as a finger. Garen quickly pulled out a bamboo tube and bit open the stopper. A drop of dark green liquid poured out from within, dripping onto the tip of her magic staff. The witch's medical staff slammed into the ground. With a loud bang, a ball of green fire burst out from the staff. With a boom, the green light scattered in all directions. Instantly, the surrounding snakes became extremely fearful and retreated. The witch doctor began to chant something loudly. Her Zaku's language was rhythmic, as if she was chanting some kind of incantation. Suddenly, the green light turned into a green halo. In an instant, countless green meteors shot out in all directions. Many green sparks splashed out and landed on the surrounding snake. The snakes immediately twisted and rolled, opening their mouths to hiss and roar. As if in extreme pain, they immediately retreated far away. There were also snakes that quickly turned around and slithered away. A hint of pain appeared in the witch doctor's eyes. She quickly pulled out another bamboo tube and bit it open. This time, a drop of bright red liquid poured out. She fiercely bit her finger. Scarlet blood flowed out and mixed with the bright red liquid. Boom! The magic staff slammed onto the ground again. The light that erupted from the tip turned into a strange light. The green light was tinged with red, like a ball of blood. The demonic two-colored light quickly spread out and enveloped those twisting snakes. Many of them quietly lowered their bodies, and some twisted a few times before becoming motionless. The witch doctor's expression became more and more pained, and her breathing became more and more rapid. Shea could clearly see that her neck was covered in sweat, and the sweat was flowing down her face like water down to her neck from under the mask. The light grew brighter and brighter. When it spread out, it almost enveloped the entire cave. Finally, the surrounding snakes seemed to have calmed down under the witch doctor's miraculous power. These snakes did not die. Instead, they seemed to have entered a state of hibernation or had fainted. However, they all crawled on the ground, motionless. Quick! My medicine can only last for a quarter of an hour at most. After saying that, her body suddenly went limp and she sat down on the ground. She took a deep breath and stared at Shea. Her voice was somewhat hoarse. As for you, I've done what I can do. Next, it's your turn. Shea looked at the witch doctor. Her eyes were somewhat unfocused. Shea whispered, "You, go kill the biggest snake." She shook her head. "I will sit here. If you cannot come back, I will die here as well." Ada stood up and cast a peculiar look at the witch doctor. Then, he suddenly said in a low voice, "Interesting, this magic of the Zaku people seems to be using life force as the price. Is it a type of life magic?" Todoro's ears were sharp. He heard those words and could not help but cast another glance at the witch doctor. Ada then turned to Shea and said, "All right, you have easily passed the first stage. However, it will be your turn next. The big snake you are looking for, do you see those snake holes on the wall? Climb up and you will be able to reach its lair." Shea glanced at the densely packed snake holes on the wall. He gritted his teeth and made up his mind. He quickly ran to the side of the wall. Using both his hands and feet, he quickly climbed up the wall. After finding the nearest hole, he crawled in. Although the snake hole was not very spacious, one person could barely crawl in. The others below watched Shea's actions. Under Garen's lead, they followed suit and climbed up. "I can't move for now." She suddenly turned to Ada and said, "Mr. Darwin, if you are a friend of the Zaku people, please state your position." She spoke in the Zaku language. Hearing that, Ada smiled at the witch doctor and said, "I can assure you, at the very least, I am not an enemy of the Zaku people." After saying that, Ada walked to Todoro's side and slapped the magician's buttocks. "You can't climb up? Don't you have that magic carpet? Just fly up. I don't like climbing either. I'll have to trouble you to bring me up with you." Cough cough, this chapter has 9,000 words. I said I would update 10,000 words, but I'm missing 1,000 words. Cough cough, tomorrow. To be continued. If you want to know what will happen, please go to www.chidian.com. There are more chapters. Support the author. Support the original reading. Chapter 250. 8,000 words. GOR Chapter 236 Demandras. The inside of the snake cave was wet. Shea crawled his way through and his hands were smeared with a disgusting sticky liquid. There were also pieces of something thin on his hand. When he got closer, he was able to identify that it was pieces of snake skin that had fallen off. Shea spat out a mouthful of saliva and used both hands to support himself on the ceiling. When his knees were aching from the crawling, he finally reached the end of the cave. At the end of the exit there was an even bigger cave. He didn't know how the ancient goblins had built this place, but they had dug a cave underground. Shea really began to suspect that the ancient goblins were close relatives of the rat. However, there was no time for him to curse the ancient gnomes. After crawling out of the cave, Shea was immediately shocked by what he saw. The cave inside was at least several times bigger compared to the one outside. However, it was 7 to 8 meters deeper. At the end of the cave was a cliff. Coincidentally, there was a 1-meter wide rock platform protruding out. Shea carefully stood on top of the rock with his back against the wall. Looking down, he could not help but suck in 7 to 8 breaths of cold air. So many snake eggs. Inside the cave below the cliff, there were piles of eggs piled up around. The size of the snake eggs were as big as a faceplate, and each pile was 3 to 4 meters high. There were likely hundreds of them. After a cursory glance, Chen Xiaolian estimated that there were tens of such piles of eggs in this cave. They were densely packed around, and each of the piles had a conical shape. The greenish-white eggshells were wrapped in a dark green translucent sticky liquid. The sticky liquid clearly possessed a strong adhesive property. It fixed the piles of eggs so that they would not slip off. The entire cave, including the floor, was covered with a thick layer of this sticky liquid. It appeared slippery and disgusting. There was also a strange fishy smell. More importantly, Shea found that the temperature here was extremely hot. After coming out of the cave, he could clearly feel the heat wave hitting his face. It was humid and stuffy, coupled with the disgusting stench in the air, making him feel bored and want to vomit. Disgusting, this is so damn disgusting. Lao Tzu has never seen such a disgusting thing in his life. Shea spat out. After looking around for a while, he frowned. There were only so many snake eggs in this cave. The Demandra's serpent was nowhere to be seen. Where's the sacred serpent? Shea looked around. At this moment, the other Jack Ku warriors also crawled out of the snake holes on the walls of the cave. The cave was full of rock platforms, and the Jack Ku warriors were standing on the rock platforms. Ada! Shea called out in a low voice. Ada's voice came from behind him. It turned out that Ada and Todoro had followed Shea into the snake hole that Shea had entered. At this moment, they had just crawled behind Shea. Shea asked in a low voice, "Where's the serpent?" "You're asking me?" "Who should I ask?" Ada glanced at Shea impatiently, but when he saw the snake eggs piled up like a mountain in the cave, his eyes lit up with excitement. Before Shea could do anything, Ada suddenly grabbed a rope tied to Shea's body and tied it to a protruding stone in the cave. He pulled the rope and quickly lowered himself down. He seemed very excited. When he was about 2 or 3 meters away from the ground, he let go and jumped down. Fortunately, the ground of the cave was covered with a thick layer of green mucus. It was slippery and soft, so he wouldn't be hurt at all. Shea also slid down. Then, more Jack warriors slid down as well. After everyone landed, they all felt that there was something wrong with their feet. Walking in this place, every step they took seemed to sink deep into the translucent green mucus. It was very difficult to walk, and the slippery feeling made them feel like they could fall down at any time. Ada had already opened his arms and ran in front of a pile of snake eggs. His eyes were filled with excitement. He stuck both his hands into the ball of green sticky liquid and used his strength to pull it out. A ball of sticky liquid flew up. At the same time, he held up a snake egg and looked at it in front of his eyes. His eyes were filled with a sense of judgment. Then, he threw the snake egg away and stuck his arms into the slime again. He picked up another egg and looked at it carefully. Then, he threw it away again. It was as if he was carefully comparing something. Finally, when he picked up the third egg, Ada's face lit up. He lowered his voice and cheered. He didn't care about the disgusting green slime on the egg. He rubbed the eggshell on his face a few times, and his face instantly turned green. Found it. It's this kind of thing. Ada's eyes were filled with eagerness. He held the snake eggs as if he was the snake that gave birth to these eggs. His face was filled with tenderness and love. Shea couldn't help but take a few big strides over and pat him on the shoulder. "What are you doing?" Ada snorted. He was somewhat dissatisfied that Shea interrupted his thoughts. That snake, as soon as Shea opened his mouth, Ada immediately slapped his head. Ah, that's right. I was too excited and almost forgot about the snake. I can't use these eggs now. All of these eggs have a magic resonance with the snake. If any egg is broken, the snake will wake up earlier this way. He yelled twice and summoned 2 or 3 Jack warriors. He commanded these guys to search around the surrounding piles of eggs. They found 7 or 8 more eggs. Pick the biggest one. Also, pay attention to the eggshell. It must be green with a hint of white. With Ada's wisdom, the Jack warriors picked out 10 snake eggs and placed them at the lowest cave entrance on the wall. Then, Ada searched around his body and took out a piece of worn-out sackcloth. He wrapped it around the eggs and one of them disappeared. In just a few moments, the 10 eggs had all disappeared on the spot. Todoro was dumbfounded. A spatial storage magic tool? At this moment we can't find the snake, Shea said anxiously. It was obvious that if the snake was here, everyone would have found it. Since that thing was a holy snake, it must be huge. After walking around the dozens of piles of eggs twice, Shea suddenly asked, "How long does it take for these snake eggs to hatch?" "Very soon. Usually, a big snake can produce about 100 eggs at a time. It hatches about once every 6 years. Every time it hatches, there is about a 50% chance of survival." "Hatches once every 6 years." Shea looked surprised. Ada sneered. "What? You think that's too slow? This kind of big snake has some blood relation with us dragons. Do you know how long it takes for a real dragon to hatch an egg? At least 30 years. An adult dragon's reproductive period is only 100 years. During its reproductive period, it can only produce offspring once every 20 years. It can only produce no more than 3 eggs at a time. Under normal circumstances, it can only produce 1 or 2 eggs. The chance of successfully hatching is no more than 30%. Compared to the dragon race, this kind of creature with our blood is so superior in reproduction that it makes one's hair stand on end." Ada's expression was filled with deep envy. Shea snorted, but then he did some calculations. "You said this thing can produce 100 eggs at a time and hatch once every 6 years? If that was the case, then the number of snake eggs here was a bit too much. Look here, there are at least thousands of snake eggs." Hearing Shea's words, Ada's expression suddenly changed. He looked at Shea, and an unnoticeable abnormality flashed through his eyes. Then he took a deep breath and said in a deep voice, "Not bad, you're right. There are too many snake eggs here." He immediately jumped up and dashed towards the center of the pile of eggs. Due to his feet slipping, he stumbled as he ran. However, after reaching the center of the pile of eggs, he reached his hand into the pile of eggs for a long time. When he retracted his hand, the dark green mucus had a faint trace of blood on it. "These eggs are new." Ada's expression was serious. He suddenly bent down and started to search the ground quickly. He knelt on the ground and used his knees to move. His hands kept digging into the thick layer of mucus to search downward. Finally, after searching for a while with a splash, he lifted up a big piece of mucus. His hands pulled out a colorful thing from below. It was a piece of snake skin. The snakeskin's surface was pitch black, without the slightest pattern. It looked like a black rag, but after Xiaya took it, he subconsciously pulled it. He pulled it very hard, but even with the strength of his arms, the snakeskin didn't move an inch. It looked extremely tough and strong. It's so damn tough," Shea praised from the bottom of his heart. However, when he raised his head, he saw that Ada's eyes were wide open. He was staring at the big piece of snake skin in his hand. His expression was blank. His mouth was wide open, as if he could swallow an egg. "What's wrong with you? You. Ada suddenly shook his head. "Did you see this snake skin clearly? It has no patterns. No patterns. It's all black. Yes, it's black. It has no patterns. So what? Haven't you seen a snake with pure black skin? Speaking till here, Shea's heart was also moved. He remembered that he had seen this kind of big snake. It seemed that its whole body should be covered with bright yellow patterns. You don't understand. Ada's expression was very serious. The characteristics of these things is that they have to shed their skin many times in their lifetime. The first time they shed their skin is when they are 10 years old. From the first to the second time it takes about 20 years. The third time it takes about 40 years. The fourth time it takes about 80 years. However, the stronger the innate ability, the shorter the time needed to shed their skin. Every time they shed their skin, their strength will increase by leaps and bounds. At the same time, every time they shed their skin, the patterns on their skin will become slightly dimmer. I once heard an ancient legend in the tribe. In ancient times, when these things were fighting against the dragon clan, there was once an extremely strong big snake. That guy was very strong. Before he was 500 years old, he had shed his skin 8 times. Almost all of the patterns on its body had disappeared, and it had almost turned into a pure blue giant snake. The natural color of the body of this kind of thing represents the attribute of their strength. The blue color represents the control of the water series magic. That is also the legend in the records of our tribe. According to the legend, these big snakes were the strongest existence. They shed their skin 8 times and most of the patterns were removed. However, there were still some traces left. This means that their strength has reached the peak of a very strong realm. Their strength can even be compared to an adult golden dragon. But don't forget, that was only 8 times of shedding. The patterns were not completely removed. But look at this snake's skin, it has no patterns at all. This means that the big guy here has probably shed his skin 9 times. Its strength is even stronger than an adult golden dragon of our dragon clan. If it was someone who understood the structure of the continent, he would understand the shock brought by Ada's words. But Shea, this ignorant guy, only widened his eyes. Stronger than an adult golden dragon? Is an adult golden dragon very strong? Ada glanced at Shea. You have seen Dora's strength when she was alive. What do you think of her strength? Very strong, Shea said without hesitation. When Dora was still alive, she had easily killed 4 magicians. If it wasn't for the fact that she was weakened by the curse and was heavily injured, she wouldn't have been killed by his sneak attack. Dora is just an Earth-type dragon. An adult golden dragon, on the other hand, can kill 6 Earth elemental dragons like Dora. F***ck. Shea's expression also changed. Could he kill 6 living Dora? Shea knew very well that with his ability, not to mention 6 Dora, as long as 1 Dora was alive, she could easily kill him. Let alone 6? Stronger than 6 Dora? Things have changed. We need to leave this place immediately. Ada made a prompt decision. His eyes flashed with determination as he stared at Shea. If it was before, I would have thought that you might have a chance. If it had only molted 8 times, with you and my help, I might have a few ways to trick it. But now legend has it that after molting 9 times, the color of the snake's skin will become pure and its magic immunity will reach a perfect state. I won't be able to use any of my little tricks anymore. Let's go. After saying that, Ada quickly pulled Shea away from the pile of eggs and ran outside. Everyone, come here. Put down the things in your hands. We need to leave this place immediately. Hurry. Hurry. Don't talk nonsense. Ada's expression was very nervous. Shea had never seen this guy who always looked like he needed a beating lose his composure like this. However, at that moment a sharp voice suddenly rang out. It seemed weak, but it clearly fell into Shea and Ada's ears. That voice was as sharp as a needle, piercing their ears and straight into their hearts. It's rare to have guests visiting, but, don't you intend to say goodbye to the master before leaving? The voice was cold and full of chill. Just by listening to the voice, Shea could not help but shiver. A layer of goosebumps appeared all over his body. Then, he saw that behind the pile of eggs, the thick layer of green mucus underground was slowly being squeezed. Something gently stretched out. Shea was stunned. The thing that stretched out from under the mucus was a hand. Before Shea could regain his senses, a second hand stretched out. These two hands pressed against the mucus, and with a gentle push, a body was pulled out from under. Seeing the appearance of the thing that came out from under the mucus, not to mention Shea, even Ada was completely stunned. Green skin, skinny and short stature, gradually growing ears, a long nose, and a bald head. This thing that came out from the mucus on the ground, it was not a big snake, but a gnome? Gnome? That's right. It was a gnome. Shea would never be wrong about this kind of thing. But for a gnome to suddenly appear in such a place was more unbelievable than seeing a ghost. To be honest, even if a ghost suddenly appeared, it was more likely than a gnome to appear. The gnome came out of the ground and shook his body twice. His small eyes stared at Ada and Shea in front of him. Those small eyes were full of a vicious light. He turned and swept his gaze over the surrounding Zakus who had gathered around Shea. Humph! This cold snort seemed to carry a powerful vibration as it fell into everyone's ears. The sound contained a powerful magic power, immediately shaking Shea to the point of dizziness. There were two Zaku's warriors behind him who stood there without making a sound. They were directly shaken to the point that their ears and noses bled, and they fainted on the spot. Zakus? Despicable Zakus, you actually sneaked here. Do you want to betray me? The gnome stood quietly next to a pile of snake eggs with his hands behind his back. He looked dry and thin, and anyone here was much taller and stronger than him. But such a gnome just stood there, casually standing with his hands behind his back, and naturally had an imposing manner that made Shea's hair stand on end. The aura in this guy's eyes seemed to be extremely cold, as if he was looking down on everything with disdain. It was as if standing there, he was not a weak gnome at all, and the group of humans in front of him were not even ants in his eyes. A strong sense of danger shrouded Shea's body. This dangerous aura was clearly coming from this goblin's body. This kind of sense was a natural instinct that Shea had acquired growing up in the mountains since he was a child. Whenever he encountered an extremely powerful and dangerous opponent, this feeling would remind him of the crisis he was in. But at this moment, just standing in front of this guy, Shea almost felt his clothes instantly drenched in sweat. His heart was madly beating, and that strong aura was so oppressive that he almost couldn't breathe. Any guy he had met in his life, any guy, no matter if it was Hastings or anyone else, they had never given him such a strong oppressive feeling. There was even a moment where Shea seemed to be hallucinating, as if the gnome in front of him was infinitely tall. It was as if a huge mountain was standing in front of him. Traitors will have the consequences of being traitors. The gnome laughed coldly. His terrifying laughter was like sharp needles stabbing into everyone's hearts, and in a flash, it was like tens of thousands of needles stabbing into their hearts. Without a sound, another two Zaku's warriors trembled and softly fell to the ground. Hoo-yah! A loud roar. Garen's face was scarlet red, and his dark skin was like a red-hot iron instantly turning red. His roar was like a clap of thunder, and it immediately interrupted the gnome's cold laughter. Garen had already raised his two stone axes. With a roar, the Zaku's warrior's figure turned into a gust of wind as he madly pounced forward. While he was in midair, under the two axes, a vigorous black flame aura was already shining. The black flame aura was so black that it was shining. This wasn't Dochi, but some kind of battle technique of the Zaku's. But in Shea's view, Garen's crazy attack, the black flame aura's strength was no weaker than the Dochi of a Byzantium high-level warrior. Boom! The two axes chopped down at the same time, and Garen was like a big bird in midair. But when the black flame aura on the axe pressed down on the gnome's head, it suddenly froze. Then, the gnome seemed to raise his head and looked at the tall Garen. His eyes stared at the opponent's axe with a hint of disdain and ridicule. Boom! In the midst of this rumbling sound, Garen gave a low roar, and the two axes in his hands instantly exploded into fragments. The black flame aura scattered and Jie Lin's entire body was sent flying backwards. His body slammed into the wall of the cave, creating a large crater that was filled with cracks. Then he heavily smashed into the ground. Garen's strength was really not weak. In Shea's view, Garen's strength was definitely not inferior to a high-level warrior. Even if it was him, if he didn't use the crimson murderous dragon thorn, he might not be able to match up to this Zaku's warrior. But Garen was instantly killed by this gnome in one move. After falling to the ground, blood gushed out from his mouth. The other Zaku's warriors roared and were about to rush forward. "Wait!" Ada suddenly shouted and flew in front of everyone. Ada stared at the gnome in surprise, his eyes turning. "You? Just now, that was a high-level return of the shield magic." The gnome was stunned for a moment. He looked at Ada and snorted. "You are a little dragon in human form, but your eyes are very sharp." "Humph! When I was sleeping, I felt someone going back and forth in the cave outside for who knows how long. It must be you, little dragon." "Haha, a dragon in human form. Did you use the ultimate transformation spell? Why can't I smell the disgusting body odor of dragons on your body?" Ada stared at this fellow, his face solemn, and slowly retreated. You are. At this moment, Shea finally shouted and stepped in front of Ada. Holding the fire fork, he resisted the urge to rush forward and shouted, "Do you still need to ask? It is Demandras. Damn it. How can Demandras be a gnome?" Hearing Shea's words, Ada's face suddenly changed strangely. He turned back and looked at Shea deeply, then turned back and looked at him for a while, nodding. "Yes, you must be. Although I don't know how you became a gnome, but I have to admit, we are not your match. After molting 9 times, even a gold dragon would be no match for Demandras. We are too far apart." The gnome Demandras sneered. Its voice was sharp, and the hissing sound was indeed a bit like a snake. "If that is the case, then come and die. I will let my children taste your flesh and blood. Ha! What could be more delectable than sucking the soul of a dragon? Ah, and this kid, the smell of his soul is a bit strange." Ada stared at the gnome, but opened his arms and stopped the Zaku's warriors behind him from going forward. He suddenly raised his head and puffed out his chest. "If that is the case, we admit defeat. Just kill us." As he spoke, he even took 2 steps forward. Shea was stunned for a moment. He saw Ada secretly give him a look. What was strange was that Demandras didn't do anything. He didn't even speak. Instead, he stood there and squinted his small eyes. He stared at Ada for a while and then smiled coldly. "Seems like you are a smart dragon." Ada's forehead was full of cold sweat, and his body looked as if it was fished out of the water. Hearing the gnome's words, he laughed wildly. "Looks like you really have no way to hurt us. You are indeed Demandras, but due to some special reasons that we do not know, you became a gnome. I believe that this form. You are in a very weak state. All right. I saw that some of the eggs are new. You must have just laid eggs. That is why you are very weak now. That is why. Cunning little dragon, no need to guess." Demandras stopped laughing and stood there, looking into Ada's eyes with a teasing look. "I can tell you. I have indeed just laid eggs, so I am very weak now. I'm not an ordinary Demandras. I'm a mutated Demandras. At the same time, I am the only one in the history of our race who has evolved 9 times. Because of my mutation, I have 4 different forms. Now that I am a gnome, it is a form of self-protection. I am temporarily unable to use my attack power, but I still have perfect defense and magic immunity. If you want to know something else, The high-level shield return spell just now is the only way I can hurt you. In other words, if you do not attack me, I will not be able to hurt you. And there is another good news for you. My transformation into a gnome is a form of self-protection, and I am unable to control it. The good news is that I will be in this weak state for at least a year. But the bad news for you is that even in this weak state, I can transform into my original form for at least 2 hours every day. Although I will only have half of my strength when I transform into my original form, it is more than enough to kill you, Ant. At this point, as if it was afraid that Ada did not understand, it asked in a teasing tone, "Now, do you have any other questions? Smart little dragon?" Ada said in a low voice, "You cannot hurt us, weakness after laying eggs, transformation, you are stalling for time." After saying that, he shouted, "Everyone, run! This guy is stalling for time. Quick!" He turned around and pulled Shea. "Run if you don't want to die, while there is still a chance." The Zakus were still unwilling, but Garen woke up at this time. He heard Ada shouting in the Zaku's language, and struggled. "Listen to his orders." The group of people rushed into the cave in a sorry state. Then, they scrambled up the rock platform above, and squeezed into the tunnel one after another. Watching these guys escape, Demandra's expression was still cold. It stood there quietly and sneered. "Run, run, I hope you can run faster. Chase is my favorite game." At this time, its body suddenly trembled slightly. A vicious light flashed in Demandra's eyes, and its eyes fell on the ground. Its original goblin form was so short and thin, but at this moment, the short shadow suddenly twisted and then elongated little by little. "Oh, it seems that time is almost up. My prey, you have to run faster." As it said, it licked the corner of its mouth gently. "It will transform into its original form? That is, into a big snake." Shea crawled behind Ada. Ada panted and turned back to roar, "Nonsense! I may have an idea." Shea suddenly sneered. At this moment, they had crawled to the other end of the cave. Shea pushed Ada out with force, and then he crawled out. After turning around and pulling Todoro out, the country bumpkin's eyes flashed with a cunning light. "Remember the other cave under the waterway, those metal-eating ants? Pleading for votes. Dancing and waving a little handkerchief pleading for votes. To be continued. If you want to know what happened next, please go to www.chidian.com. Support the author, support the original reading." Chapter 251. GOR Chapter 237 Draconic or After rushing out of the cave, Shea saw the exhausted witch doctor sitting there. He strode forward. Without saying anything, he picked up the weakened witch doctor and placed her on his shoulder. The witch doctor did not struggle. She simply cast a peculiar look at Shea and allowed him to carry her. After a while, she sighed softly and whispered into Shea's ear, "You fellows failed?" Shea had no intention of saying anything else. A soft sigh came from beside his ear, and the voice sounded like a wry smile. "I had already guessed it. The holy snake is too powerful. I never had any expectations. If you have the life to run out alive, then say that." Shea rushed to the riverbank in large strides and jumped in. In the shallow area, the water level was up to his waist. He turned his head and shouted, "Ada, hurry up, I need your water avoidance pearl now. We need to leave this place immediately." Ada and the others rushed to the riverbank. At that moment, the snakes on the surface of the river had begun to awaken. The effects of the potion had begun to fade. Ada took out the water-repelling pearl and the group gathered around him again. The water-repelling beads separated the space under the water. Everyone struggled to walk in the dark and gloomy underwater tunnel. Although they had tried their best to speed up, after walking for about 7 minutes, they had only covered half of the distance in the underwater tunnel. It was at that moment that a violent tremor suddenly spread out from the water behind them. The waves of water shook violently and a booming sound rang out. The violent impact caused the space within the water avoidance bead to be flattened. With such a powerful water force, the waterless space of the water avoidance pearl was instantly broken into pieces. The water instantly became as turbulent as a raging tide. Everyone was swept away by this vigorous tide, and the crowd was scattered in the water. Shea held the witch doctor on his shoulder tightly with one hand while his other hand paddled with all his might. Earlier, he had choked on a mouthful of water and nearly drowned. Thankfully, this country bumpkin had a conscience. Even so, he did not let go of the witch doctor on his shoulder. However, the powerful tidal wave sent many of them crashing into the walls of the underwater passageway. 2 of the Zakus were hit so hard that blood flowed out from their ears and noses. Their throats were choked and water was poured into their mouth. It did not take long for them to stop moving. Although everyone was trying their best to paddle down, it was difficult for them to maintain their balance underwater under the turbulent tide. Most of them could only let their bodies be controlled by the tide and be swept forward. At this time, Shea even felt like a fish thrown into a whirlpool. Fortunately, there was finally light in front of them. Although the tide was fierce, it was moving faster. With a cry of alarm, the group of people was finally washed out from the other end of the underwater passageway. Once the surroundings were open, everyone struggled to paddle up as if they did not care about their lives. Heads popped out of the water one after another, gasping for air. Some of them even coughed desperately. But at the same time, 2 corpses floated out of the water. These 2 Zakus had died very miserably. One of their heads had hit the stone wall in the underwater passageway, creating a hole. The other one had suffocated and drowned. Get ashore. Quick. Ada was the last one to get out of the water. He coughed awkwardly and shouted with all his might. Shea threw the witch doctor ashore and handed her to 2 Zaku's warriors. Then he shouted, "Everyone retreat into the forest! Quick, 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 quick!" Just as he finished speaking, they heard a loud boom. Then, everyone clearly felt the ground beneath their feet shake. Without a doubt, the rumbling sounds and the shaking came from the underwater cave. "It's coming! Quick, quick, quick!" Shea shouted and grabbed Todoro, who was still struggling to paddle. He threw the magician onto the shore. "Shea, are you thinking of using those metal-devouring ants?" Ada ran to Shea's side. Shea grabbed him and rushed to the shore. After putting Ada down, he stared at him and said, "Do you have any other ideas?" "Fine." Ada wiped the water off his face. "Either we'll be killed by that big snake or bitten to death by the ant. There's no difference. Let's fight." Boom! Another violent sound rang out, like a clap of thunder. The entire cave seemed to shake violently. Cracks appeared on the wall on the other side of the river. Then, countless stone fragments fell down. The waves began to sway violently, and large pieces of bubbles began to gush out. It was as if the river water had been boiled. Finally, with a loud bang, there was a huge splash in the water. A roar filled with endless violence shook everyone's ears, and a huge black head jumped out of the water with a bang. "It's coming!" Shea shouted. It was a huge snake head. It was incomparably huge. How did that head look like a snake? It was simply the head of a dragon. On the rhombic head, there were long bone spikes sticking out from the sides. Between the bone spikes there was a thin membrane. The head looked like a dragon. That was especially true of its huge nostrils, which sprayed out clumps of faint black flames. A bloody mouth was opened and sharp fangs were slightly curved. It had to be said that this fellow's body was much bigger than Shea had imagined it to be. Son of a bitch! This thing was simply like a dragon. It's even bigger than Dora. Shea quickly retreated and shouted in frustration. Boom! The head quickly locked onto Shea. Then, it suddenly struggled with all its might. However, it seemed to have stopped moving. Next, another thunderous sound came from beneath the water surface and the mountain walls. It's stuck. Its body is still stuck in the waterway. Let's run. Hurry! Hurry! Shaya led everyone into the jungle as if their lives depended on it. As soon as they left the riverbank, they heard a gust of wind behind them, and the air became incomparably hot. Turning their heads to look, the big snake's head opened its mouth and spat out a mass of black flames, which exploded on the riverbank. The riverbank instantly turned into black gas. Even some of the large rocks by the riverbank were turned into powder by the black flames. Damn it! What is that thing? Dragon's breath. Ada and Shaya ran side by side. Ada's voice was very gloomy as he said, "It is already a perfect body. After going through 9 molts, it has evolved to its highest form. Can already use its own breath like us dragons." Shaya cursed. The group of people ran for their lives in a panic, running all the way through the forest. This time, everyone used almost all of their strength. In the distance behind them, the rumbling sounds, mixed with the sound of the cave bursting, were like whips lashing at their bodies. Everyone had seen the huge head of the serpent and the power it displayed after its breath. Even the bravest Jack warrior would not be stupid enough to think that they could kill this guy after seeing such a scene. We've reached the hillside. Shaya rushed to the front and looked at the hillside occupied by the metal-devouring ant. When he saw the mounds of ants' nests on the ground, Shaya's spirit was finally shaken. Charge! Everyone spread out. Quickly charge! Right at this moment, an earth-shattering explosion suddenly came from behind them. Kacha! A loud cracking sound was heard, followed by a loud and clear roar. Shaya and Ada looked at each other. Before they could say anything, Todoro had already cried out miserably, "This is bad! That thing is coming out!" Todoro! Shaya grabbed the magician. "Don't run! You stay here and block this fellow with me." When the magician heard this, he almost wet his pants. His face turned pale and his legs went soft. He almost fell to the ground. "Bastard! You better be alert." Shaya grabbed Todoro's neck and quickly said, "I need to block that big fellow here. Otherwise, if it catches up, everyone will be finished. These gold-devouring ants are our hope. I need your help. Only you can control that magic carpet. We will lure these ants out and then we will sit on the magic carpet and fly away." Todoro was so scared that his scalp was about to explode. He trembled and stammered, we stay here? Don't talk nonsense. Take out the magic carpet." Theodore seemed to have been scared out of his wits. When he took out the magic carpet, he chanted the incantation 3 times before getting it right. That incantation wasn't too difficult to begin with, it was nothing more than words like "Great Merlin." Although Shaya had stopped, the other Zakus had already followed his orders to cross the hillside and leave. Shaya looked at Ada, who was beside him, and asked, "Aren't you going to run?" Ada snorted and said, "If we cannot block it, we will also die. So, there is not much difference whether we run or not. Besides, I am a dragon. Rather than getting killed while running away, I might as well." All right. Don't talk to me about the noble dignity of the dragon race and such nonsense." Shaya waved his hand impatiently. He fiercely tied his belt and weighed the flaming fork in his hand. At that moment, the loud roar from the distance rang out once more. This time, the roar carried with it an invisible sense of oppression. That oppressive feeling hit him in the face, and the aura was so strong that Shaya couldn't help but tighten his whole body. His heart suddenly gave birth to a feeling of infinite irritation and fear, almost making him uncontrollably enter the state of crimson killing intent. Draconic might. Ada's calm voice contained a trace of fear. "This thing has evolved very thoroughly. It possesses almost all of the instincts of the dragon race. It has even grasped draconic might." A rumbling sound rang out from the distance, and they saw a clump of vigorous black chi sweeping over. Then, the 3 of them stared with widened eyes. A huge black figure appeared in their line of sight. "That damned snake! How does its body look like that of a snake? The snake's body was as thick as a house. The huge body stretched out. Shea was unable to clearly see how long the snake was. He could only watch as the huge snake's body quickly moved forward, crushing everything in its path. Everywhere it went, the mountains crumbled and the earth cracked. The trees and stones in its path were all crushed into pieces. Wherever it passed, it seemed to have cleared out a wide path in the forest. Shea looked at the fellow coming over and suddenly frowned. He suddenly turned back to look and said, "No. They are too slow. Now that the ants have been lured out, I'm afraid even they will die here. Damn it." With that, Shea's face suddenly flashed with a trace of desperation, and he strode forward. "What are you doing?" "I'll try to hold it back for a while." Shea turned back and laughed grimly. Demandra's majestic mountain-like body swept through the jungle without any hindrance. Shea leaped up and arrived in front of it in a few leaps. The country bumpkin rushed to a distance of about 100 steps and immediately stopped. He brandished his fire fork and immediately cut off a big tree beside him. He growled and hugged the tree trunk with all his strength. The tree trunk was as thick as 3 or 4 people hugging it. Shea could only ruthlessly dig his hands into the bark and barely lift the tree trunk up. His eyes flashed with a red light and a crimson murderous aura suddenly burst out. With a whoosh, Shea poured all his strength into his body and threw out the huge tree trunk with all his might. The snake's body was so huge that there was no need to worry about accuracy. With a loud bang, the tree trunk accurately hit the snake's head. The strength of Shea's crimson murderous aura was almost comparable to the fighting energy of a top 9th level warrior. With such a strong blow, even Demandra's head was knocked to the side. He then struggled to turn his head and stared fiercely at Shea. "Hey, big guy. Lao Tzu is here. Is your body too big that your eyesight is not good? Look carefully, I'm right here. Look for me if you have the guts." Shea jumped up and down, waving his arms and shouting and jumping. The snake stared at Shea and suddenly shrank its head and opened its mouth. When Shea saw this scene, he suddenly had an idea. He suddenly tore open his clothes and grabbed the washbasin-sized dragon scale hidden in his chest. Boom! A black flame shot out from the snake's mouth and rushed towards Shea. Shea jumped backwards with all his might and jumped behind a rock, but he heard a rumbling sound. Wherever the black light passed, 2 big trees in front of him were directly smashed to pieces. The rock in front of him only blocked it for a moment before it was pierced through. Fortunately, Shea had already shrunk his whole body and was hiding behind the dragon's scales. He felt a powerful and vigorous force colliding with his body, and he was immediately blasted away. His body was thrown dozens of steps away before he rolled on the ground. Shea looked at his body and saw that his clothes were already in tatters. The dragon's scale in his hand was already full of holes, like a piece of wood that had been eaten by insects. Casually throwing away the already scrapped dragon scale, Shea felt severe pain all over his body. He didn't know how many wounds had appeared on his body, arms, and thighs. This was because the dragon blood had strengthened his body's resistance to attack. If it was an ordinary body, perhaps it would have already been smashed into pieces. In just one exchange, Shea was injured. He was shocked. Then, he forced himself to take a deep breath. Dora's voice rang out in his mind, "Eyes. Its only weakness is its eyes." Eyes. Shea took a deep breath. Just as he was about to unleash the crimson killing intent to use Dragon Stab, he heard Dora's anxious voice in his mind, "Don't be reckless. You can only use Dragon Stab once more. If you can't hit its eyes, it will be useless. Only use it when you are confident." Shea cursed inwardly. He could only turn around and run away. Behind him, Demandras suddenly let out a wild laugh. The snake's mouth spat out human words. "Ha ha. Insignificant thing. Giving up on running away just like that?" Shea ran for over 10 steps before stopping. He turned his head and shouted, "Damn it! You're just relying on the fact that you're bigger than me. You reptile. If Lao Tzu was as big as you, he would have smashed your head. Demandras angrily roared, straightening his head and rushing over. Shea's movements were quick and nimble. His body was like a big ape as he crazily jumped from tree to tree. Each jump covered a distance of 5 to 6 meters. Demandras was attracted by him and spat out 2 more times, but they didn't hit him. Instead, they swept out a large area of the surrounding forest. Shea's appearance was also not relaxed. He cut a sorry figure to the extreme. Both times he dodged by a hair's breadth, and the second breath almost hit him, but his left leg was still scraped by the fierce wind caused by the breath. Even though his body was strengthened by dragon blood, his leg was still dripping with blood, and he suddenly looked like he was limping. At this time, he had lost the ability to dodge. Quick! Shea turned his head and roared into the distance. Ada and Todoro were already sitting on the magic carpet. Seeing Shea's sorry state, Todoro silently chanted the name of God. He took a spear left behind by the Zakus and stabbed it into an ant nest below. Then, he pulled the corner of the magic carpet and quickly pulled it up, buzz. The buzzing sound made Todoro's mouth twitch. He saw groups of black ants crazily rushing out of the mound below. Sitting on the magic carpet, the movement of the ants really looked like a tidal wave. Black waves instantly surged out from the countless mounds of earth. These thick and sturdy ants let out clattering sounds, and immediately spread out in all directions. Todoro's face was pale. Ada, who was sitting next to him, reminded him in a deep voice, "Go get Shea quickly. He can't hold on any longer." Shea could not hold on any longer. After one of his legs was injured, he could not use any strength. If Demandras used another breath, it would be enough to blast him into pieces. Demandras had already reached its head towards Shea. Its huge body was coiled up. If its head moved forward, it would be able to swallow Shea directly. At this moment, the magic carpet whizzed past. Todoro, who was sitting on the carpet, grabbed the corner of the carpet with both hands. Ada reached out his arm and grabbed Shea's hair, lifting him up. The magic carpet whizzed past, and almost brushed past the fangs on Demandras's mouth. Todoro was so shocked that he could not stop praying for the blessings of the gods. The wind whistled, and Shea was forcefully pulled onto the flying carpet by Ada. Theodore screamed loudly, and the flying carpet carried the 3 of them as they fled into the distance. Boom. The ant swarm seemed to have finally exploded. Black clouds began to rise from the mound. The flying ants were moving out. For the gold-devouring ants, their biggest target was without a doubt the huge Demandras. The large swarm of ants immediately swept towards the huge snake. It was like a black wave crashing over. Demandras let out a roar and was quickly crushed by the countless ants. Sitting in the sky, Shea saw Demandras being crushed by the ants and immediately let out a cheerful cheer. Success! That stupid snake! Now it's going to gnaw you into bones! Shea laughed wildly. However, before he could finish laughing, he froze. The large swarm of ants had already wrapped around Demandras's body. However, after the huge snake's body rolled twice, it let out an earth-shattering roar. That roar was filled with endless majesty and shock. All of a sudden, the ants seemed to be frightened by something and scattered in all directions. Even the ants that had already pounced on Demandras's body turned around and fled. The ant swarm was like a receding tide as they hurriedly distanced themselves from Demandras's body. Draconic aura. Damn it! I forgot about that. Ada's face was pale as he cried out in alarm. Draconic aura. This was an innate mystical ability. Releasing such a powerful aura was enough to cause the ants of a lower level to feel fear and flee in all directions. They did not dare to provoke Demandras. The huge snake was still roaring. The ants had left some scars on its body, but to its huge and thick body, those scars were nothing. "Is this your idea?" My little prey. You actually want to use these ants to deal with me? Humph. Don't you understand that to me, you're just ants. Damn it. Let's fight. Shaya took out a large piece of crystal from his bosom, and then fiercely inserted it into the ring-shaped hole on the handle of the fire fork. He stood up on the flying carpet and pointed below. Put me down. Then you guys run. Lao Tzu, try to hold him back. No. Ada immediately refused without hesitation. If we don't fight, we'll still die. Shaya said angrily. I'm not afraid. Ada's face was gloomy. We have to fight. I don't like to sit around and wait for death. However, we need a better terrain, one where that guy won't be able to do anything. Shaya and Ada looked at each other and shouted at the same time. That deep canyon. There's magma there. Recommendation needed. Please everyone. To be continued. If you want to know what will happen, please go to www.chidian.com. There are more chapters. Support the author. Support the original reading. Chapter 252. GOR Chapter 238 Triple Speed. Dragon stab riding on the magic carpet. Shaya fled to the other exit of the cave in a panic. When he landed, he saw that Zack was still waiting at the entrance of the cave. Shaya jumped off the magic carpet and angrily said, Bastard! Why are you still here? The witch doctor, who was supported by two Zakus, cast a cold look at Shaya and said, The Zakus do not abandon their companions. Shaya harumphed and said, Don't fly so fast, run. We failed. The roaring sound behind them was getting closer and closer, and Demandra's massive body appeared before them once more. It was sweeping its way through the forest. Hurry up and get out. Once we get out, we will lure it into the magma abyss from before. They ran out through the passageway. The passageway was not too big, and was much smaller compared to Demandra's body. Perhaps it would be able to hold on for a while. At the end of the passageway, they ran out of the exit with the magic array. Shaya suddenly shouted, Don't be in such a hurry to run. Everyone, pick up your weapons first. We will have to risk our lives later. When they entered the cave earlier, all the Zakus had left their metal weapons outside. When they came out, those weapons were still there. Shaya ran over to pick up his howling bow and iron spine armor-piercing arrow. He also put the dagger with the golden hilt back into his trousers. Then, he waved his hand and said, Hurry up and run. That fellow is too strong. This passageway cannot stop it. It is too old. He had only just finished speaking when a loud boom rang out from the passageway. Suddenly, the stone fragments above them fell down and several cracks appeared on the walls of the cave. Hurry! 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 Shaya shouted. Demandra's body slammed into the passageway again and again. Then, the passageway began to collapse. Large pieces of stone fell down and the roaring sound became even more ferocious. The passageway was collapsing faster than expected. The strength of this damned serpent was simply terrifying. Shaya glanced inside and saw that a huge snake head had forcibly squeezed into the passage. Although the huge body had not yet entered, it had forcibly burst the passage. As Demanthras laughed wildly, his head rushed in bit by bit. Boom! With another loud bang, more than half of Demandra's body was smashed into the tunnel. His huge body crushed all the rocks in the tunnel into pieces. It's in. Run! Everyone fled in the other direction of the passageway, but after running 2 steps, Shaya suddenly looked to his side. Ada had disappeared. Damn it! Where is that guy? Shaya was furious. He turned around and saw that Ada was still standing at the same spot. However, this fellow didn't seem to have any intention of running away. He just stood there and stared blankly at the other closed doors. Many of the doors in this place were closed. The iron door was tightly shut. The only passageway without a door was the one that led to the cave with the gold-devouring ant. At that moment, the huge snake was trying its best to squeeze in. Its head was about to burst out of the passageway, but Ada stood there like a fool, staring blankly at the other doors. Shea was furious. He turned around and ran back, shouting, "Ada, what the hell are you doing? Do you not want to live anymore?" Ada turned around and shouted at Shea, "You run first! I suddenly have an idea. Quick!" "What?" Ada grabbed Shea's arm and shouted, "Listen! Think of a way to drag this thing to that abyss. The terrain there is very suitable, drag it there. I need 15 minutes. I promise I will return there in 15 minutes. I have an idea that might be able to kill this fellow." After saying that, he suddenly ran to the side of a door. Who knows how he did it, but after groping around the side of the door, the iron door suddenly opened. Ada quickly ran in. Then, the door quickly closed. Shea was dumbfounded. Holy shit! That bastard didn't abandon us and run away by himself, did he? However, the door opened and closed so quickly that Shea simply did not have the time to stop him. Besides, even if he did chase after him, he would not be able to leave his Zaku's companions behind. Damn it! That damned dragon! Shea was so angry that he cursed. At that moment Demandra's head was about to burst out. Shea dared not delay any longer. He quickly turned around and ran away. The Zakus had already reached the end of the long passageway. They waited there and saw Shea panting as he ran out. They could not help but feel surprised. "What? Master, where is Mr. Darwin?" Theodore had a mournful look on his face. "Could he have been eaten by that monster?" Shea gloomily said, "That bastard ran away. Damn it." He was extremely angry. If he had known that the fellow could open the other doors, they would have followed him and escaped through the other doors. Now, going back the way they came was simply a dead end. They were standing at the entrance of the living specimen area. In front of them was a wide and huge abyss. Below it was a rushing waterfall, and at the end of the abyss was a terrifying magma. The problem was that there was originally a bridge here, but it had completely collapsed when they came here. Now, there was such a wide abyss in front of them. Shea had no choice but to ask Todoro to take out the magic carpet. Dragging so many people under the magic carpet, it was inevitable that they would stagger when they flew up. Fortunately, they did not fall. Everyone landed safely on the opposite side of the abyss. "It's here," Shea said angrily. "Let's see if we can fight it here." Everyone knew that although there was a passageway in front of them, the end of the passageway was really a dead end. At the end of the passageway was the iron door. Previously, there was a shield stuck in it, leaving a gap, but now the door was closed. Even if they continued to run in, there was no way out. "Master, maybe that big snake can't fly. With such a wide abyss, it probably can't cross it, right?" Todoro said, feeling lucky. Todoro's words cheered everyone up, but Shea doubted in his heart. "That damn snake is so powerful. I'm afraid this abyss can't stop it." Finally, a roaring sound came from the passageway on the opposite side of the abyss again. This time, the sound came very quickly. Soon, a huge black figure appeared in the passageway. Its huge head rushed over, breaking the passageway open. Then, with a roar, the huge head rushed out of the passageway. Although the huge body was still in the passageway, the part of the snake that came out was already raised high. Across the abyss, the big snake's eyes were filled with a vicious light, looking at Shea and the others on the opposite side. "Why aren't you running, my lovely prey?" The vicious voice was like a sharp needle piercing everyone's ears amidst the sound of the rushing waterfall. A bone-chilling cold could not help but emerge from the back of everyone's head. "Retreat! Retreat!" Shea opened his arms, and everyone retreated into the passageway bit by bit. The big snake opened its mouth and laughed wildly. It raised its head high, looking down at these insignificant humans on the other side of the abyss. Amidst the wild laughter, the big snake's head suddenly rushed over. "Attack!" Shea roared loudly. The Zakus behind him were already prepared. With Shea's roar, more than 10 Zakus lined up in a semicircle formation and threw out more than 10 iron spears. Every one of these Jakku warriors was an elite. Even the spears they threw were covered in light. It was obviously some kind of power similar to Do-Chi. Demandra's was just trying to intimidate the humans. The abyss was so wide that it could not attack the humans on the other side. However, when its head was only about 20 meters away, more than 10 spears landed on its head like stars in the sky. Clanging sounds could be heard. The dense number of spears that fell on Demandra's head were all bounced off. This big snake's body was really tough. The tens of long spears softly bounced off and fell into the abyss. Demandra's laughed wildly. It opened its mouth and said, "Ridiculous ants, your attacks are too weak." As it spoke, it opened its mouth and spat out a black flame. "Run!" Shea roared. Everyone ran into the passage to hide. The black breath passed through the abyss and directly hit the entrance of the passage. The people hiding in the passage heard a loud rumbling sound outside. Demandra's breath carried a powerful crushing force. It directly destroyed half of the entrance of the passage. It was as if a piece of the wall of the cave was directly dug out. The entrance of the passage was instantly shrunk by 5 or 6 meters. "Look carefully, ants, this is called an attack." Demandra's laughed wildly. "I'm going to start killing." As it spoke, it suddenly opened its mouth and slowly protruded a strange gray mass of air. A few bright spots of light appeared from the mass of air. In the blink of an eye, these spots of light were imprinted on the people on the other side. Shea clearly felt as if he had been locked down by an invisible force. This feeling of being bound made his whole body tense. He could not help but roar. In an instant, crimson killing intent erupted. His body relaxed and he instinctively jumped back to dodge. But at the same time, a spot of light suddenly appeared on each of the 4 or 5 Zakus beside him. Then, he heard the big snake whistle softly. The 5 Zakus suddenly floated forward involuntarily. Their bodies were suspended in the air, and they flew above the abyss. Amidst the wild laughter of the big snake, a strange sound suddenly came out of its mouth. After the Zakus flew out, they desperately struggled and screamed in the air, but there was nothing they could do. Shea tried to reach out and pull them, but it was too late. He could not pull them back at all. The sound coming out of the big snake's mouth seemed to have some kind of strange rhythm. After the 5 Zakus flew out, they struggled in the air for a while, and then roared in pain, bang, bang, bang. At the same time, 5 faint balls of light flew out from the bodies of the 5 Zakus people. As if under the control of some kind of power, they quickly flowed to Demandra's. The big snake opened its mouth and sucked. With a few whistling sounds, the 5 balls of light were directly sucked into its mouth. In midair, the 5 corpses that had already exploded into a bloody mess fell powerlessly into the waterfall below the abyss. Shea and the others were stunned. They stared at the big snake in the distance. "Damn it! What kind of magic is this?" Shea grabbed Todoro. "What kind of magic is this?" Todoro's expression was miserable, but his blank eyes showed that he did not know. "Soul Overture. It's a forbidden spell." Dora said the answer in his mind. There was a trace of fear in Dora's voice. "It's over. This is a forbidden spell. We can't resist it. This guy can devour souls." "Devour souls?" Shea's neck shrank back. Dora's voice was filled with panic. "This forbidden spell is one of the most terrifying types of curses. It can devour souls to replenish its life force and power. Its soul overture can directly control our minds and turn us into its puppets. You saw it just now. Once controlled by its soul overture, we will not even have the chance to resist." Demandra's laughed. "A very good delicacy. Ha 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 ha. I will not kill you all right away. You all are the best snacks for me after I wake up. Come here, my desserts." As it spoke, it once again spat out a gray ball of air from its mouth. Shea's face sank and he abruptly strode forward. Standing at the entrance of the passageway, he quickly pulled out the howling bow. Shea strode forward. Lowering his waist, he pulled out 5 iron spine armor-piercing arrows and knocked them onto the bowstring. Next, he abruptly twisted his waist and his body turned around. His eyes instantly turned red. The red killing intent surged out and a majestic power surged out from his body. Shea exhaled and pulled the howling bow open. He pulled the bow until it was like a full moon. However, that was not enough. He abruptly twisted his waist and borrowed the strength from his waist to gather all his strength into his arms. Then, with a twist of his wrist, he pulled the bowstring once more. The condensed howl bow immediately let out a clear humming sound, and the blade on the bow faintly trembled. Shea was still not satisfied. At that moment, his face was red and the corners of his eyes were trembling. His fingers, which were gripping the bowstring, had been cut and blood flowed out. He took a deep breath, and the muscles on his arms suddenly bulged. He twisted his wrist again, and pulled the bowstring a little wider, making it circle around his hand once more. 5 iron spine armor-piercing arrows were knocked on the bowstring. Suddenly, the red killing intent spread all over it and the arrowheads shone with a red spot. At that moment, Shea seemed to be holding a red full moon in his arms. Boom! With Shea's body as the center, it seemed to have formed an aura. Under the red light, all the power was gathered on the howling bow. With a roar from Shea, the howling bow let out a roar. The sound of the bowstring vibrating was really like the roar of a dragon. With a loud bang, the red light suddenly burst out. Swoosh! With a loud noise, 5 sharp arrows turned into 5 red light chains and surged out. The power of the red killing intent, the toughness of the howling bow, and Shea's effort to pull the bowstring around 2 more times, brought the power to the extreme. Full bow, triple rapid fire. 5 crimson chains of light shot out, and pierced through the gray mass of air almost instantly, forming 5 balls of red light that blasted onto Demandra's head. Demandra's huge head was instantly enveloped by a red light. In the 5 bursting lights, the metal of the iron spine armor-piercing arrows exploded. Even Demandra's tough body could not withstand all of it. Suddenly, 5 parts of his body burst out with blood. In the midst of the explosion, Demandras roared angrily. His huge head was knocked back by the huge explosion and slammed heavily into the wall. The impact was like a landslide, and the whole cave shook faintly. Shea's shot had almost exhausted all of his strength. He loosened his grip and threw the howling bow to the ground. His body staggered, but he forced himself to bite his lips. Then, he pulled out the fire fork and held it with both hands. A beast-like roar burst out from his mouth. The red killing intent was activated again. This time, the large piece of crystal on the handle of the fire fork suddenly became extremely dazzling with red rays of light. Shea stood there, his whole body was like a raging ball of fire. Forcibly activating the crimson killing intent, and also in a state of exhaustion, Shea's roar quickly revealed a painful taste. The depths of his mind began to feel an intense pain, as if his brain was splitting apart piece by piece. The crazy power in his body surged again, but this time, blood began to flow from his ears and nose. Beads of blood also seeped out of his pores. The muscles on his body bulged, and his skin suddenly cracked. His clothes were soaked in blood. "Todoro!" Shea roared. The roar shook Todoro. Then, Shea's body flashed and appeared beside Todoro. Flying carpet! He stepped on the flying carpet, and Todoro quickly chanted an incantation. The flying carpet carried the 2 of them and quickly closed in on Demandras. Shea stood on the flying carpet. The red killing intent was dazzling. Todoro, who was sitting beside him, only felt that his whole body was pressed down and could not move. He could only drag the corner of the flying carpet with all his strength. The flying carpet quickly flew into the air above the abyss and approached Demandra's. At this moment, the serpent raised its head again. After taking the blow from the whistling bough, the serpent's head had been split open in 5 places. Demandra's eyes were filled with rage. It opened its mouth and roared, creating a gust of wind that almost swept the flying magic carpet off the ground. Shea stood on the flying carpet, both hands holding the flaming fork. Before the flying carpet got close, he had already let out a loud roar. Under the huge crystal, the red light on the flaming fork was several times stronger than usual. Shea seemed to be holding a sun wheel in his hand. He jumped up high in the air with the flaming fork in his hand. Like a meteor, he crashed into the snake's body. Boom. The red light on the flaming fork directly pierced through Demandra's skin. Following which, the flaming trident pierced through Demandra's tough skin, shattering his scales into smithereens. Shea held the flaming fork with both hands. His thrust was so deep that the handle of the flaming fork could not be seen. Under the intense red light, a huge hole appeared where the flaming fork had pierced through. Shea held the flaming fork and hung on the snake's body. Borrowing the force of his falling body, the indestructible flaming fork immediately slashed down along the snake's body. With a series of crisp caw-caw sounds, the fiery fork directly cut a 3-meter-long gash in the large snake's body. The wound was right under the big snake's head. Stinky blood sprayed out and drenched Shea's whole body. The big snake ate this heavy blow and immediately twisted its body in pain, letting out a painful howl. Shea struggled to twist his body in midair and jumped up. Taking advantage of the situation, he pulled out the fire fork and landed on the big snake's back. As soon as he landed, he immediately knelt down on the snake's body. Shea was in so much pain that his vision turned black. The scales on the snake's back were covered with thin barbs, which immediately cut his legs and made them dripping with blood. He felt that his knees were probably broken. Shea knelt there, his whole body covered in blood. It was unclear whether it was his own blood or Demandra's. He once again raised the fire fork with both arms and roared. This time, the red light from his whole body instantly condensed on the fire fork. Dragon! Stab! Boom! The red light pierced through his body, and the flaming fork heavily slammed into the snake's back. The snake had already struggled to raise its head, but after Shea's final strike, the red light smashed into its back. Demandra's seemed to be suppressed by an invisible force and lowered its head again. The red light on its back exploded, sending flesh and blood flying everywhere. Large amounts of snake scales, snake skin, snake flesh and snake bones were blown apart. Demandra's roar this time was 3 times louder than the previous one. Its huge body seemed to be unable to withstand such a powerful force. With a loud bang, its body fell heavily to the ground. Looking at its back, where Shea's final all-out attack had hit, almost a quarter of Demandra's snake body had been broken off. Brothers who voted for the recommendation, please take note. When you vote, don't click on all votes. It's best to vote 1 by 1 or 2 times. Because if you click on all votes directly, the Chidian system may treat it as vote manipulation and deduct your data. Cough cough. I'll have to trouble you guys, please help me throw in some recommendation votes. To be continued. If you want to know the future, please go to www.chidian.com to read more chapters. Support the author, support the legal reading. Chapter 253. Geoar Chapter 239, Shared Life. Demandra's fell to the ground with a loud bang, its huge mouth closed and its nostrils spewing out clouds of hot air. Its low growl was filled with anger and unwillingness. As for Shea, he directly rolled down from the snake's back and fell to the ground. He was already paralyzed there. At this moment, Shea's physical strength had already reached 0. The continuous eruption of crimson murderous aura, as well as the use of a large piece of crystal to cast dragon thrust, had completely drained all of Xiaoya's strength. At this moment, the country bumpkin could only lie there gasping for air. Fortunately, the country bumpkin's strength had improved considerably. Unlike before, he would fall into a coma every time he used up the dragon spike. Although he couldn't even move his little finger, he was barely conscious. Seeing that the huge monster was actually killed by Xiaoya's display of invincible might, the opposite Zakus were so shocked that their mouths were wide open and their eyes were wide open. After a brief moment of astonishment, they immediately cheered. Zakus waved the spears in their hands, jumping and shouting. At this time, Todoro finally turned around and flew back. The magic carpet landed on the ground. Although the great snake that was close at hand made the magicians feel fear, our lackey Todoro still had a bit of conscience and didn't abandon shit. Master, you're not dead, right? Todoro jumped down from the magic carpet and helped Shea up. However, Shea's heavy body made it difficult for the magus, especially with the snake's bloody stench. Shea forced himself to open his eyes. He was panting, but he couldn't say a word. He just raised a finger and pointed to the distance. Theodore looked in the direction of his finger and understood. Shea's fiery fork was still stuck in the snake's back. The fiery fork was stuck in a piece of snake flesh. The flesh had been completely blown apart, revealing the snake's bones. Only the handle of the fiery fork was exposed. Although his heart was filled with fear, the snake was already dying. The magus still mustered up his courage and carefully walked over step by step. He climbed up the snake's back in a flurry and reached out to pull the handle of the fire fork. Shea looked at Todoro's timid appearance and couldn't help but grin. He said in a weak voice, "Idiot, this snake blood is good stuff." Todoro's heart skipped a beat. Snake blood? Wasn't this thing said to have the bloodline of a dragon? Dragon blood was a legendary treasure. In that case, the snake blood was probably. Thinking of this, Todoro's magician's instinct kicked in, and he immediately dispelled the fear in his heart. He searched his chest, but couldn't find any container. Gritting his teeth, he tore off a piece of his robe and carefully soaked it in blood from the snake's wound. Then, he put away the piece of robe that was soaked in snake blood. But when he reached for the fire fork, he realized that something was wrong. No matter how hard Todoro tried to pull it, the fire fork wouldn't budge at all. The poor magician grabbed the handle of the fire fork with both hands, pulled and pulled with all his strength, but the fire fork didn't budge at all. "Master, this thing is stuck," Shea cursed in his heart. He took a deep breath and said, help me over." Todoro jumped down and ran over to Shea in a few steps to bring him to the snake's side. Demandras was still gasping for breath and looked extremely weak. Shea snorted. "Comparable to a golden dragon? That's all there is to it." He flipped over and climbed onto the snake's back. Todoro hugged his thigh and tried to lift him up. Shea barely managed to climb up. But when he held the fire fork, he realized that something was wrong. Just as Xiaoya's fingers touched the fire fork, suddenly, the handle of the fire fork, as well as the crystal he was wearing on his chest and neck, instantly burst out with 2 red lights. Ah! When Shea's fingers touched the handle of the fire fork, he felt as if he was burned by fire. He instinctively retracted his hand. He was already extremely weak, and this time, he almost rolled off the snake's back. Luckily, Todoro was beside him and supporting him. Poor magician, Shea's but was almost on top of his head. "Master, I can't hold on for much longer. You have to hurry up." The magician's face was sad. "Shut up." Shea's voice was very serious. He looked at his fingers and didn't find anything wrong. But when he saw the red light on the handle of the fire fork, the red light on his necklace seemed to resonate with it as well. What's going on? He tried to reach out his hand again. This time, he was mentally prepared. When Shea reached out and grabbed the handle of the fire fork, the scalding sensation made him frown. Just as he was about to grab the handle of the fire fork, a sizzling sound was heard. Shaya endured the pain of burning his hand and tried to pull out the fire fork with all his strength. But at this moment, boom! Shaya could only feel a roaring sound coming from the depths of his mind. It was as if something had burst open in an instant, or as if something had broken free from its shackles. Suddenly, a strange feeling spread out from his mind. At this time, his whole body shone with a red light, as if he was in a state of crimson killing intent. But then, something strange happened. The fire fork that was stabbed into the snake's back suddenly issued a sizzling sound. At the place where the fire fork was stabbed, the flesh on the snake's back instantly withered. Blood no longer flowed out. Instead, it was as if the blood was evaporating. No, it wasn't evaporating. It was being sucked into the fire fork. At the place where the fire fork was stabbed, the flesh instantly withered and the snake's skin became dull. The remaining snake scales fell off piece by piece. Once the incomparably hard snake scales fell off, they seemed to have lost their previous hardness. After falling to the ground, they became as weak as glass and shattered into pieces. The withered area spread out bit by bit, and the flesh around the fiery fork gradually disappeared. With a gentle breeze, it turned into ashes and drifted away. Shia was completely dumbfounded by what he saw. At the same time, he suddenly felt a strange change happening to his body. Originally, Shia's body was covered with wounds. Excessive use of the crimson killing intent and the dragon thorn had caused his body to suffer an enormous burden. Many parts of his skin were cracked and his body was unable to withstand such a violent power. Many parts of his flesh were torn apart. Both his legs were also covered with wounds. Especially his knee area, it was a bloody mess. But at this moment, when Shia's hand gripped the fire fork, it was as though a tidal wave of power had washed into his body. This feeling was as though he was standing under the scorching sun in the summer and the scalding heat was washing over his entire body. He watched as the wounds on Shia's body suddenly disappeared bit by bit. New flesh and skin grew out at a frantic pace. As for the wounds on his legs, it was as though time had reversed and they disappeared without a trace. In just a few breaths of time, all the wounds on his body healed up. Shia was completely dumbfounded. Although he still appeared to be bathed in blood, he was very clear that his wounds had disappeared. He subconsciously raised his arm. When he did so, he was even more shocked to find, my strength has also recovered? It was as though he had eaten a legendary elixir. In just a short while, Shia had returned to his most perfect state. Not only were his wounds healed, even his strength had recovered to its peak state. Shia had only just spat out that one word when he suddenly heard two caw-caw sounds. The sound came from the flaming trident. The fiery trident seemed to have sucked dry the surrounding snake's flesh and blood, and easily detached itself from the snake's body. However, countless fine cracks suddenly appeared on the originally pitch-black surface of the fiery trident that was exposed to the outside. Then, a series of caw-caw sounds rang out and the surface of the flaming trident began to crack. The layer of black matter on the surface of the flaming trident, which appeared to be a mottled and decayed outer shell, finally peeled off. After the fine fragments fell off, the flaming trident seemed to have suddenly doubled in size. Originally, the flaming trident was only the size of a short sword. Shia had often complained that with his big body, carrying this weapon was not as impressive as carrying a war axe. However, this time, the flaming trident seemed to have come to life. It broke free from the layer of impurities on the surface of the flaming trident and with a whoosh, it doubled in size. The originally pitch-black body of the flaming trident was still black in color. However, at this moment, a faint red light flowed out from within the blackness. It was so red that it shone. The faint color was somewhat similar to that of red copper. What is going on here? Shia felt his mind at a loss. Holding the flaming trident, he looked at himself, and then at the body of the flaming trident. At this moment, Dora suddenly exclaimed in his mind, "That's right. Life-sharing. Heavens! Almighty Dragon God! Could it be that this kid actually obtained your blessing? Life-sharing with the dragon race? How is that possible? What a despicable and shameless slut! He actually obtained the recognition of life-sharing." Actually, what Dora wanted to say was, could it be that the gods have gone blind? However, considering that this sentence was too disrespectful to the revered dragon god, the mother dragon restrained herself. When Shea heard Dora's exclamation, he immediately quivered. What did you say? What life-sharing? Life? Bastard! Impossible! There must be a mistake. Dora roared angrily. Shut up! Shea was angry. He held the pendant around his neck. First, tell me clearly what is going on. Dora was so angry that she was completely speechless. After a moment of silence, she let out a wild laugh. What is going on? Ha 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 ha. This is the most ridiculous thing I've ever heard. What is going on? You actually ask me what is going on? Hurry up and tell me! Shea shouted. Demandras has the blood of the dragon race. After 9 molts, this Demandras has a perfect body. In other words, it can be considered as a pure dragon. My poor, cute, but sad kid. Your flaming trident directly absorbed the life force of this dragon, and then this life force was replenished to you. You shared its life force and power with a dragon. That stupid brain of yours. Could it be that you still haven't thought of the answer? Dragon share. Shea's expression changed when he heard this. Congratulations, kid. Dora's voice was filled with endless annoyance and frustration, and even seemed to be vaguely viciously mocking. You have become the first dragon in this world in nearly 10,000 years. Ride. Night. Shea's face was full of astonishment, as if he was very innocent and at a loss. The injuries all over his body healed in an instant, and his physical strength was restored to full. Moreover, from what Shea himself felt, it was not only this that had recovered. Even his originally extremely weak mental state had recovered. At this moment, he was simply full of energy. His whole body was full of energy, and his mind was clear and sharp. It was as if he had slept for 3 days and 3 nights, and the feeling of being full of energy was about to explode. I don't understand. Why? Dora roared angrily. To be recognized by the dragon race, a dragon knight must have a noble bloodline, and must be accepted by the dragon race itself. But you can inexplicably absorb the life of Demandras, and without its permission. Your flaming trident. There must be something strange about your flaming trident. This was nonsense. At this moment, Shea was very clear that his flaming trident was not only a treasure, but also a very amazing treasure. His heart moved, and he held the flaming trident and pulled it out forcefully. Ah! No! Dora suddenly shouted in his mind. But it was too late. The moment Shea finally pulled the flaming trident out of the snake's body, the big snake under his feet suddenly let out a crazy roar. The snake, which was originally on the verge of death, suddenly seemed to come alive. Its huge body suddenly twisted and directly threw Shea down. Shea fell to the ground and saw the huge snake's body rolling over. He hurriedly grabbed Todoro, who was already unable to get up from the fall, and jumped to the side. Roar! Demandras, who was obviously on the verge of death, suddenly raised its head again. Just as it raised its huge body, its head helplessly tilted down. The huge hole on its back made it unable to support its body. Demandras angrily spat out, "Bastard! Lowly creature! How dare you steal my life force?" Asterisk boom! Asterisk after a loud sound, Demandras's body flashed with a mass of black gas. Within this black gas, the huge hole on its back, which took up 1/4 of its body, quickly healed. New flesh and blood grew out crazily, and snake scales appeared. In the blink of an eye, the hole was healed. Shea cried out in alarm. Demandras had already lowered its head, and fiercely slammed into Shea. Shea shouted, grabbed Todoro, and jumped out. However, the terrain here was too narrow. The two of them jumped out and immediately fell into the abyss. Todoro cried out, but Shea held the fire fork in his hand. As he fell, he looked at the cliff beside him, and with a low roar, he fiercely stabbed the fire fork into it. With a cracking sound, Shea felt a strong pulling force, and the two of them suddenly stopped. He held the fire fork tightly, and the other hand grabbed Todoro's hair. The two of them were hung on the cliff just like that. "What's going on? I thought I killed it," Shea shouted. "Idiot! How could the perfect body of Demandras be so easily killed by your little dragon stab? What a joke! You can't even injure it. This Demandras has the power of a golden dragon, and can easily heal its own injuries." But just now, Dora also seemed to be unable to understand this problem. Maybe it's your fire fork. When your fire fork stabbed into its body, it seemed to have blocked its ability to heal itself. Maybe there's some power in your fire fork that suppressed its ability. But once you pulled out the fire fork, then… Oh. That's easy. Shea's spirit was lifted. I'll just stab it again. As he spoke, he threw Todoro up. Grab that rock. The poor sorcerer almost broke his nose. Like a gecko, he clung to a protruding rock on the cliff. But Shea had already used both his hands and feet to lightly climb up like a monkey. Stab it again? Shea, I'm warning you, I'm afraid it won't be so easy this time. Ignoring Dora's warning in his mind, Shea had already jumped out of the abyss. After landing on the ground again, he held the fire fork in his hand and got into a stance. This feeling of being full of energy was simply too good. When Shea unleashed the crimson killing intent once more, he was surprised to find that when the crimson killing intent erupted out, the intensity of the power was 3 times stronger than before. Brandishing the fire fork, it was as though he was holding a red torch. Dragon stab. Go to hell. Shea leapt high up into the air. While he was still in the air, he infused both his arms with power and fiercely thrust the fire fork forward. The mass of red light was like a meteor as it slammed into the body of the great snake. Shea was originally filled with confidence, but in the end, boom! The red light smashed into the body of the great snake. This time, however, Shea felt as though he had slammed into an iron wall. The huge snake let out a painful roar, and its huge body was smashed backwards. However, when the fire fork struck the body of the great snake, it only managed to pierce through the scales. Soon, it was bounced back by an even stronger force. Bang! Shea's body was like a fly that had been swatted away. With a shio sound, he flew backwards and fell into the abyss once more. I finally managed to climb up. The pitiful Todoro's face was almost bleeding from holding it in. He was barely able to climb up bit by bit from the bottom of the cliff. Suddenly, his vision turned black as Shea suddenly fell from the sky. The magician screamed in panic and instinctively waved his arms. Shea had already fallen into the magician's embrace. With this collision, the two of them fell down together. All right, I admit it. The 3 times speed in the previous chapter was my evil instincts acting up. The great red-horned 3 times speed, _, begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendation votes, begging for support, begging for a sugar daddy, haha, to be continued. If you want to know what happened next, please go to www.chidian.com. There are more chapters. Support the author. Support the original reading. Chapter 254. Gior Chapter 240. Ada wa. Cough 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 cough. After his head emerged from the surface of the water, Todoro coughed so hard that he nearly coughed his lungs out. Both his arms struggled to paddle as he cried out. The current was rapid and the waterfall at the upper reaches of the abyss was simply too strong. The two of them had only just emerged from the water when they were washed down. Todoro's cries immediately displeased Shea. Shea slapped Todoro's head. Thankfully, the place where the two of them fell was not too far away from the cliff face of the abyss. Shea brandished his flaming fork and stabbed it into the cliff face. Holding onto the flaming fork, he was able to stabilize the two of them within the turbulent waters. Shea pulled Todoro up and shouted, "Don't make a fuss. Save your strength and hold on tight. If you fall down, I won't be able to save you." After saying that, he pulled out a dagger from his boot and stabbed it into the cliff face as well. Taking a deep breath, Shea cursed in a low voice. This ghost snake, how did it become so hard? Inside his mind, Dora shouted angrily, "You rascal, you're extremely reckless. I warned you, but you refused to listen. What is going on?" "Humph." Dora suppressed her rage. "You are now sharing a life with it. The two of you have established a life contract. Forget your current level of strength, even if you are twice as strong, you will not be able to wound it like you did earlier. You need to understand it is now you and you are it. There is no such thing as killing one another. Attacking it is a violation of the life contract, a violation of the laws of nature. Naturally, your attack will be weakened. Additionally, Demandras has a perfect form after shedding its skin 9 times. It can be reborn 9 times. Even if you smash it to smithereens, it can still be reborn. And after 9 rebirths, after each rebirth, its strength would increase greatly. Even if you are not lucky enough to establish a life contract with it, you will not be able to wound it as easily as earlier. Increase? Shea muttered. What do you think? Is Demandras that easy to defeat? That's true. Shea sighed and wiped the water off his face. The strength that this guy displayed just now doesn't seem to be as strong as I thought. This is its characteristic. There's no need to maintain its strongest form all the time and waste its energy meaninglessly. Only when it encounters a powerful enemy will it transform 9 times and become a perfect form comparable to the golden dragon. Todoro had a strange expression on his face. Seeing Shea talking to himself, he couldn't help but cry, "It's over. Master has gone crazy. Help, what the hell are you screaming for?" Shea glared at Todoro and made up his mind. "Lao Tzu, go up and meet that big snake. Hold on to this dagger tightly. Don't move, hold on, I will come down and save you." Before Todoro could shout, Shea had already jumped up and stepped on the dagger's hilt that was stuck in the cliff. With this, his body suddenly soared into the sky. He unleashed his crimson murderous aura, and his strength increased sharply. This leap was like a big bird spreading its wings. Suddenly, his body rose up like a meteor. He somersaulted in the air and jumped above the abyss. After landing, he rolled on the ground and stood up, shouting loudly, "Hey! Demandras, Lao Tzu is not dead yet. Let's fight again." Demandra's body was smashed into the wall of the cave by Shea's attack. There was a deep hole in the wall. The snake struggled a few times before it broke free. Shaking its head twice, Demandras snorted and spat out, "Lowly thing, what did you use to hit me? Humph, I didn't expect you to have a divine artifact in your hands." After saying that, it opened its mouth and a black breath roared out. Shea had originally wanted to dodge. However, he suddenly had a thought. Countless thoughts flashed through his mind in an instant. However, the valiant spirit that he had in his life flared up and he made up his mind. Lao Tzu was going to take a gamble. He raised his flaming fork and stood there with his knees slightly bent. He did not even bother to dodge. The black breath roared out and blasted onto Shea's body, causing his body to be engulfed in black flames. The black flames blasted out a huge hole where Shea was standing. Even a corner of the abyss had been blasted off. Shea stood there, allowing the black flames to engulf his body. He raised his flaming fork and closed his eyes. After the loud rumbling sound, the black flames spread out and Shea felt his heart beating like a drum. His mouth was dry and his heart was about to jump out from his chest. I am fine? Shea opened his eyes and suddenly shouted, "Ha ha ha! Lao Tzu is fine! I am fine! I am fine!" Just now, he had clearly sensed that when the black flames enveloped his body, in that instant, the black flames had automatically moved away from his body. What a shocking scene! His surroundings had been blasted into smithereens. However, his body was completely enscathed within the black flames. Life contract. Natural law. Since I cannot harm it, then, this great serpent cannot harm me. That gamble just now had paid off. Shea was instantly overjoyed. He raised his flaming fork and laughed wildly. Ha 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 ha! Demandras! You cannot harm me! Demandras was enraged. It was also at a loss as it stared at the human before it in shock. It could not understand how this human could be immune to its invincible breath. The great serpent was enraged and it roared out. It opened its mouth and charged toward Shea. This time, Shea did not dodge. Instead, he let out a shout and leapt high into the air. While in midair, he held his flaming fork with both hands. Crimson killing intent burst out and a roaring red light shot toward the great serpent's head. A loud sound rang out as the two sides collided. The great serpent let out a powerless cry and its huge body was sent flying backward. Shea was also sent flying into the wall. His body was like a nail that had been nailed into the wall of the cave. Crashing sounds could be heard as the rocks fell down and half of his body was buried under them. Shea had suffered quite a bit this time. How powerful was Demandra's huge body! Shea felt as if all the bones in his body had been broken. His body that had just recovered was now bleeding profusely. His arms that were holding the flaming fork were almost broken and he spat out blood. But he was buried under the rocks. Shea coughed twice and spat out a few mouthfuls of blood. Suddenly, the flaming fork shone with a red light again. Shea immediately felt a burning sensation wash over his body. The many wounds on his body healed again. The broken bones on his arm quickly healed. Even the skin and flesh that had split open healed in the blink of an eye. Then, the granulation started to wriggle. In less than a few breaths of time, everything was healed. Apart from the recovery of his body, his physical strength was also quickly replenished. Shea shook his arms and roared. He knocked away the rocks piled on top of him and jumped out. He laughed loudly and said, "Aha! I understand now. Demandras, Lao Tzu is not afraid of you anymore." As it turned out, Shea had made the right bet. Because of that inexplicable life-sharing contract, both sides had formed a delicate balance. It was very difficult for his dragonthorn to hurt Demandras. At the same time, the damage that Demandra's attacks did to him was almost negligible. The current situation was that Shea was immune to all of Demandra's attacks and magic attacks. Because of the life-sharing contract, Demandra's magic elements had automatically treated Shea as the main body and would not harm Shea. That was why that breath was only a gust of hot wind to Shea. Although he was immune to magic attacks, physical attacks still caused him damage. Because of the strength of the attack, Shea was sent flying into the wall. The impact still caused him great damage, but there was no need to worry. Because of the existence of the life element sharing contract, once Shea was injured, he could automatically share the other party's life force from Demandras to heal his injuries. In other words, when Demandras injured Shea, it was equivalent to using up its own life force. In that case, even if there was a huge difference in strength between Shea and Demandras, at least when facing Demandras, even if Shea could not win, he would at least be in an invincible position. After thinking this through, Shea was overjoyed. He waved his fiery fork and rushed forward again. Again. I'll fight you for another 80,000 rounds. Ha 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 ha. Laughing wildly, Country Bumpkin rushed up again while brandishing his fiery fork. This time, his whole body was covered in red light, and his crimson murderous aura surged out as if it didn't cost any money. Of course it didn't cost any money. Anyway, the physical strength he consumed would be replenished by absorbing from Demandra's. Extremely proud of himself, Shea even got into a few postures and brandished his fiery fork. He actually displayed the chopping axe technique that the old guy taught him, army destroying. Shea rushed in front of the serpent in a flash of red light. The man and the serpent once again engaged in a fierce battle. The serpent's breath was completely ineffective against Shea. Demandra's tried another magic attack, but Shea easily broke through the magic's light and was unharmed. The flaming fork almost cut off one of the serpent's fangs. Fortunately, the serpent's head directly hit Shea, causing his sternum to explode, and he was sent flying into the wall. However, Shea just shook his head and the wounds on his body quickly healed. He then shouted and rushed forward again, and so, the most outrageous scene in thousands of years appeared. Obviously, his strength was far inferior to his opponent's, but Shea was almost evenly matched with the snake. Every time he was seriously injured by the snake, no matter if his bones were broken or his muscles were broken, he would jump up and pat the soil off his body before rushing forward again. The man and the snake fought fiercely for a while, but the Zakus who were watching the battle were stunned. In the eyes of the Zakus, this guy called Shea was simply, unimaginably fierce. His bravery was astonishing. This guy was actually fighting the snake head-on, and both sides were evenly matched. The battle was so fierce. The snake roared angrily again and again, but it couldn't do anything to this human. Shameless. Simply shameless to the extreme. Dora didn't know if it was ridiculous or helpless. Shea was simply using the life-sharing contract to deal with Demandra's. According to the Dragon Knight contract, now that Demandra's and Shea had established a life-sharing contract, Shea was already a Dragon Knight to some extent, and Demandra's was equivalent to Shea's mount. But since ancient times, there had never been a Dragon Knight who dared to attack his own mount. It was simply shameless. As the battle went on, although the snake injured Shea again and again, Shea recovered by sharing Demandra's life force, while Demandra's himself became weaker and weaker. It was almost impossible to determine the winner of this battle. The only result was, in the end, Demandra's life force would be absorbed by Shea, or both sides would die together. But after careful analysis, Shea's chances of winning were a bit higher. Time passed little by little. Demandra's was almost driven crazy by Shea's entanglement, and his furious roars almost caused the cave to collapse. Finally, after sending Shea flying again, Demandra's roared and stared at the Zakus on the other side of the river. He angrily shouted, "I'll kill your companions first!" Demandra's suddenly raised his snake body, roared, and spat out a ball of black flame. Shea just got up from the ground. His legs were broken, and his waist was almost smashed, so his recovery speed was slower this time. Seeing the ball of black flame shooting towards the Zakus on the other side of the abyss, Shea suddenly became anxious. He jumped up and jumped on Demandra's head, holding the flaming fork, and smashed it on Demandra's head with a roar. The pitiful snake immediately closed its mouth after being smashed, and the black flames that it spat out were stopped just like that. The Zakus on the other side of the abyss dodged into the passage in horror, but the black flame still directly collapsed more than half of the rock platform outside the passage. "Ha ha! Despicable thing! Although I can't kill you, I can kill all your companions." The snake turned its head hard and pushed Shea down. It suddenly thought of something and laughed wildly. "You despicable thing! What method did you use to steal my life force? Ha ha! Very good. I won't kill you. I'll kill all your companions. As for you, I can't kill you, but I can catch you. You can't die, right? Then you can stay here. Stay here with me forever." After that, it suddenly stretched out its huge body. Although the abyss was hundreds of meters wide, the length of the snake was even longer. Its head almost reached the other side of the abyss in an instant. The huge head opened its mouth, and the Zakus on the other side cried out in alarm. They hurled their weapons while the rest quickly retreated into the passage. As Demandras laughed wildly, the spears and axes that were thrown at his head were all deflected. His mouth was almost blocking the entrance of the tunnel. After opening his mouth, he obviously made a gesture of inhaling. Not good. Shea's face suddenly changed. This fellow was going to exhale. After blocking the entrance of the passage, all it needed to do was to exhale into the narrow passage, and everyone inside would die. Shea was filled with hatred and rushed forward. The flaming trident in his hand turned into a red light and smashed down. This time, it struck the body of the snake. Demandras cried out in pain, but its body twisted and it knocked Shea away. Its mouth was still open when Shea fell to the ground. A cracking sound was heard. The pain was excruciating. His waist was broken and he struggled to get up. However, his recovery speed was not fast enough. A faint mass of black light emerged from the mouth of the snake. Shea cried out and closed his eyes. Boom! An earth-shattering sound rang out. Shea could not bear to watch that tragic scene. He closed his eyes and heard the roaring sound in his ears. Suddenly, the entire cave shook. Stones rolled down from the top of his head like a torrential downpour. Although his eyes were closed, he could vaguely see a red light in front of him. Pa! Pa! Several hot and sticky things splashed onto his body. Shea felt that something was wrong. When he opened his eyes, he was stunned. Demandras had just stretched out its body. Its huge body was like a bridge over the abyss. But now, a mass of red light enveloped its body. That loud sound was clearly not the result of its breath. Instead, it came from behind. The red light exploded, and the flesh on the snake's body, starting from its tail, exploded, leaving only a long, thick, and white snake's bones. No one knew what kind of power it was, but the flesh and blood of Demandras, starting from its tail, all the way to 1/3 of its lower body, was blown apart by the explosion, exposing its white bones. Shea subconsciously turned around. He saw that the passageway behind him had collapsed after the snake squeezed its way in. However, at the entrance of the passageway, there was a person standing there. Ada appeared to be in a sorry state. His clothes were tattered and his face was covered in dust. However, there was still that infuriating smile of disdain on his face. In front of him was a thick metal pipe. There were several pulleys beneath the pipe. The red light on the top of the thick metal pipe was fading away. The mouth of the pipe was still burning with red flames. Seeing this, Shea's eyes widened. Magic cannon? With a loud crashing sound, the lower half of the snake's body was shattered. Next, the broken snake body fell into the abyss. The sound of water splashing could be heard as it fell into the rapid flow of water. It was quickly washed down, following the flow of water. In the blink of an eye, it was washed down the huge gap. With a loud boom, it fell into the abyss filled with magma. I told you to hold on here for 15 minutes. I will definitely rush over. Ada held the cannon in his hand and smiled at Shea from afar. This thing is really hard to find. It took me a lot of effort to push it here, however, it seems you did a good job. You. Shea swallowed his saliva and pointed at Ada. I thought you ran away. This thing, where did you get it? Ada had already thrown down the cannon and quickly ran over. Enough nonsense. Let's run. This thing cannot kill it. It has 9 chances to transform. At most, it will come back to life after a while. Let's hurry and leave this place. I am sorry to inform you that I will be going out tomorrow. Thus, there will be no updates tomorrow. However, the day after tomorrow, which is Sunday, I will make up for it. Finally, I will continue to ask for monthly votes, recommendation votes, support, and sugar daddy __. to be continued. If you want to know the future, please go to www.chidian.com. There are more chapters. Support the author. Support the original reading. Chapter 255. This chapter is 11,000 words long. Chapter 241. Falling out. Shea looked at the magic cannon with reluctance. The power of this thing was too terrifying. Previously, he had used all his strength to unleash all of his crimson murderous aura and unleashed the dragon's spike, which almost caused him to collapse. Only then did he manage to severely injure Demandras. That was all he managed to do. He had only managed to inflict a huge wound on the serpent's body. But this thing, with just one blast, it was able to turn a third of the snake's body into dust. The power of his all-out attack was much weaker than that of the magic cannon. One must know that Demandras had already transformed once. Right now, its magic defense and physical defense were both quite high. Wouldn't it be a pity to throw away such a powerful weapon? Don't look anymore. Ada quickly walked past Shea. Seeing the reluctance in Shea's eyes, he said, "This thing is quite powerful, but it consumes too much energy. This is the last one I could find that is still usable. Also, the blast just now exhausted all of its energy. It is now just a pile of scrap metal." Scrap metal? Shea sighed. His heart was filled with regret. The power of the magic cannons was unforgettable after witnessing it once. This thing was so powerful. If they could get a few dozen of these things and line them up in a row, no matter who the enemy was, they would be able to bombard them with a volley of magic cannons. Just think about it, what in the world would be able to withstand it? Even if it was an army of thousands or some grand magus, wouldn't they still be blasted to pieces? Shea was still the general of the garrison, after all. He couldn't help but think, if his army could be equipped with this thing. The next time he encountered Odin's army, Hastings and Hastings' Black Flag Legion, he would be able to blast them to smithereens. His heart was filled with regret. He clenched his teeth and hardened his heart. He turned around and left. "Master, I am still down there. Don't leave me behind." Todoro's pitiful howl came from the abyss. After redeploying the magic carpet and scooping up Todoro, the three of them crossed the abyss and came to the other side. They gathered everyone and continued to rush into the passage. Below the abyss, the crimson magma was boiling. Amidst the intense flames, the magma suddenly swelled violently. Then, with a bang, the flames spread out in all directions. Amidst the explosion of light, a huge figure shot up into the sky. The high-temperature magma flowed on its body, but it couldn't harm it in the slightest. After its huge body jumped up, it reached a height of over 100 meters and jumped into the waterfall upstream. After the magma on its body fell into the water, waves of heat rose from the water. With a sizzling sound, a huge head popped out, opened its mouth, and let out an angry roar. Demandras breathed heavily as he rose to the surface of the water. His roars spread far and wide. "I have to remind you that it should be a dead end ahead." Running quickly, Shea quickly shouted to Ada beside him. Ada snorted and did not say anything. It could be seen that this guy was very tired from running. If not for Shea holding him back a few times, this guy would not have been able to hold on. He looked very tired. "Your stamina is as bad as a woman's." Shea was a little dissatisfied. Even Todoro looked like he was running faster than Ada. To think that this guy was a dragon. Ada's face was cold. Although his forehead was full of sweat and his cheeks were flushed because of running too fast, and his breathing was rapid, he looked coldly at Shea and finally said, "Do you think it's easy to push that magic cannon out?" This passageway was already very dilapidated. It was probably because Shea and the others had triggered the killing mechanism when they passed through here. They were almost crushed to death by the huge stone ball that rolled out here. Although they were lucky to escape, The rolling pressure of the huge stone ball had cracked most of the stone slabs in the passageway. Because of the collision, there were many cracks on the walls. As they ran, there were some broken stones on the ground. Occasionally, they would trip if they were not careful. Although everyone was very tired and exhausted, they knew that there was a huge danger behind them. Everyone was desperately trying to squeeze out their strength. Finally, the passageway came to an end. The huge door in front of them blocked their way. "I told you, this is a dead end." Shea stopped and stared at Ada. "You originally stuck a shield in this door, but when we passed by, we accidentally moved the shield away. Now the door is closed. What should we do?" Ada looked at Shea. He did not say anything. Instead, he quickly ran to the wall of the passageway and started to feel around. He also kept knocking around. After a while, he turned to look at Shea. "You guys triggered the mechanism here?" "Yes, we were almost crushed to death." Shea nodded. "How many stone balls came out in total?" Shea thought for a moment. "There should be 2. I blocked the first one. However, the second one rolled out and I ran out of strength. I could only lead everyone and run until we reached the abyss. After crossing the bridge, we managed to escape." Ada's eyes flashed and he suddenly stuck close to the wall. Using both his hands and legs, he climbed up the wall like a human gecko. He moved nimbly on the wall and quickly reached the ceiling. His body was almost parallel to the ceiling. After climbing on the ceiling for a while, he would occasionally stop and raise his fist to knock on the ceiling. After a while, he jumped down and stood on the floor. There was a thoughtful look on his face. After that, he ran to the side of the iron door. His face darkened as he pondered for a moment. Then, he began to move, starting from the door. He took a total of 10 steps. When he was about 5 to 6 meters away from the door, he stopped. Ada raised his head to look at the ceiling before turning around. "Everyone, move back. Stand by the door. Hurry." At that moment, a furious roar could be heard coming from the far end of the passageway. When everyone heard the roar, their faces sank. "That thing is alive again." Shea's face was stern. "So, don't talk nonsense. Hurry up and do as I say." Ada shouted. Then, he used the Zaka language to shout again. Soon, everyone followed his instructions and stood close to the door. At the end of the passageway, the roar grew louder and louder. It seemed as though the roar was getting closer. Everyone's faces turned increasingly ugly. "Hurry!" Shea. Seeing that everyone was standing by the door, Ada quickly took a few steps back. He pointed at a spot on the ceiling and said, "Blast this place open. Use your strongest move. Hurry!" "Blast it open?" Shea stared. "Nonsense. Hurry! Blast it open. Once the ceiling collapses, the stone balls inside will fall down. The big snake is coming after us. We can use the stone balls to block it." Shea's eyes lit up. "All right. Crush that earthworm to death." He took 2 large strides forward and separated his feet a little. He held the fire fork in his hand and took a deep breath. Then, he assumed a fighting stance. Suddenly, he shouted and jumped up. His head was almost touching the ceiling. Then, he stabbed the fire fork at lightning speed. With a loud bang, the red light shone brightly, and a huge hole appeared in the ceiling. As the stone fell, cracks appeared on the hole, and they grew bigger and bigger. Finally, with a loud bang, a huge stone bomb fell from the sky. This stone bullet was almost as wide as the passageway, and it was polished to a perfect circle. After it landed, it bounced twice on the spot. The rumbling sound caused everyone's faces to turn pale. If the stone bullet were to roll back at this time, then everyone would be turned into minced meat. Luckily, the terrain here was a slope that extended deep into the passageway. After the stone ball fell, it quickly rolled back inside. Shea was still afraid that his strength was not enough. He exerted his strength from behind and struck out with the fire fork. A red light hit the stone ball and instantly, the rolling momentum increased by 30%. Following the rumbling sound, everyone's expression tensed up. Ada listened attentively in the depths of the passageway. Demandra's roar was getting closer and closer. Finally, a loud bang came from afar and Demandra's roar suddenly stopped. Aha! That guy was hit. Shea laughed and then his expression changed. This stone can't kill that thing. What do we do now? Ada looked up at the hole in the ceiling. Climb up. The hole in the ceiling was not difficult to climb. After climbing up, there was indeed a way out. There was a passageway above. Obviously, it was left behind when this place was first built to store the stone balls used to attack the enemy. After climbing in, the space inside was quite big and there were many stone balls in it. These huge round stones were stuck in the passageway one by one. On both sides of each rolling stone, there was a slot cast at the bottom to hold these round stones in place. This passageway extended all the way forward and the slope was very steep. But fortunately, because the passageway was square and the rolling stones inside were round, there were always some gaps in the corners that allowed people to squeeze through. Everyone crawled forward for a while, and after squeezing through the gaps of a few stone balls, they were suddenly stunned. There was no road ahead. To be precise, the road behind was not forward, but up. This was almost a vertical passageway. The stone balls inside were piled up one by one, vertically up and down. Once one was used up, another one would automatically fall down. Looking at the passageway that went all the way up, there were gaps, but if they wanted to climb up, it would take a lot of effort. I hope this passageway will allow us to climb all the way to the surface. Shea sighed. You wish. Ada sneered. Too much dust had accumulated in the tunnel over a long period of time. Ada's handsome face was already black. He sneered, This is almost 1,000 meters underground. Shea shrunk his neck. Then where does this passageway lead to? We'll know once we get up. Ada ignored Shea and squeezed past him to climb up. Although this kind of completely vertical passageway was very difficult to climb, fortunately, there were still air pockets among the stone balls, allowing everyone to rest. After climbing for about the time it took to eat a meal, everyone was exhausted and the line was very long. Shea's stamina was the best, but he deliberately stayed at the back so that he could support those who were tired at any time. Suddenly, they heard a shout coming from above. 2 Zaku warriors were climbing at the front. Hearing their shout, it meant that they had reached the end of the passageway. The stone balls piled up in this vertical passageway had all climbed up. The person at the top had already stepped on the stone ball at the top. Shea exhaled and forcefully pushed Theodore, who was already exhausted, up. Just as he was about to say something, he suddenly heard a roar coming from under his feet. Demandra's roar was right below them. Shea's face changed and he suddenly shouted, Not good. Everyone, climb up, quick. As he said that, he quickly climbed up with his hands and feet, trying his best to lift up the people at the back. But almost at this moment, a loud rumbling sound came from Demandra's roar. At the same time, the entire passageway shook violently. Then, a terrible sound came from below. Shea's face suddenly changed. That damned snake not only caught up with them, it also triggered the mechanism. Sure enough, following the loud sound, the rolling stones deep below them were triggered. One by one, the rolling stones fell down. It must be known that this was a mezzanine where the rolling stones were stored. Once a rolling stone at the bottom fell down, the rolling stones at the top would stack up. When one at the bottom became empty, the one at the top would immediately fall down to fill the gap. In this way, those who were still trying to climb up in the passageway would be crushed into meat paste. The rumbling sound kept coming from below, and no one knew what the snake was doing down there. Damn it! It's tearing down the building! Shea cursed. Because from the sound coming from below, there was more than one stone bomb falling down. The rumbling sound was almost non-stop. As the stone bombs fell down one after another, the ones at the top immediately loosened up. Shea used all his strength to climb up. He and Todoro, who were at the bottom of the group, finally managed to climb up. Just as he climbed over the last stone bomb, a loud sound came from below. For a moment, he was almost worried that this place would completely collapse because of the loud noise. After climbing up to the topmost stone bomb, Shea immediately shouted, "Spear! Give me the spear! Quick, quick, quick!" He did not have time to wait for Ada to translate and directly snatched the spear from the hands of the Zakus beside him. At this moment, there were only 5 or 6 iron spears left in the hands of the Zakus. Shea's movements were very fast, and he quickly and fiercely stabbed these spears into the wall at the side. In just a few breaths, the 5 or 6 spears were inserted into the wall in a row. Quick, jump up. Stand on the spear handle. Quick, quick, quick. Shea took the lead and jumped up. There was no need for him to shout, and the others immediately understood the meaning behind it. When everyone hurriedly climbed up, a rumbling sound came from below, the stone bombs fell down one after another, and the passageway, which was originally slowly becoming vertical, suddenly turned into a deep hole. If Shea had not inserted the spear into the wall as a foothold, everyone would not even have a place to stand and could only fall down together with the stone bombs. However, with 5 or 6 spears in a row on the wall, the area was very limited. Everyone squeezed into a group, but it was still on the verge of collapse. "Ada!" Shea shouted. Ada was standing at the edge of the row of spears. When he heard Shea's shout, he snorted and said, "Don't worry, I'm calculating our position." This guy actually closed his eyes and still looked so calm. The rumbling sound came one after another, and occasionally, Demandra's angry roar could be heard. This big snake's roar sounded like it was in pain. Obviously, no matter how strong it was, there were dozens of stone bombs stored in the passageway, and each one weighed more than 5,000 kilograms. With so many huge stones smashing down together, this big snake suffered a lot. However, Shea deeply understood that Demandra's would not be smashed to death by these stones. Even if it suffered a little, it would not take long for it to catch up again. After waiting for a while, Shea could not help but shout again, "Ada!" So noisy. Ada finally opened his eyes and snorted unhappily. "Don't you know that you need to stay calm when calculating? If I calculate our position wrongly, we will all die together." However, he finally raised his hand and pointed upwards. "According to our position, it should be about 5 or 6 meters up. As long as you blast a hole in that area, we can get out of here." Shea was anxious. He used all his strength to climb up. He held a dagger in one hand and a fire fork in the other. He used the fire fork and dagger to stab into the wall, and then used the momentum to climb up. Soon, he reached the position Ada mentioned. "Is it here? Just blast it open?" If my calculation is correct, it should be. Before Ada could finish his words, Shea had already smashed down with the flaming fork. With a loud bang, the fire fork smashed into the stone wall. Instantly, a red light burst out and stone fragments flew everywhere. This blow blasted a hole 3 or 4 meters deep. Before Shea could pull out the fire fork, he heard a loud bang coming from inside. Then, with a whoosh, a rapid flow of water gushed out from inside. Fortunately, Shea's other hand was holding the dagger. The dagger was embedded into the wall until the hilt could not be seen. Although the flow of water was rapid, Shea was immediately pushed back. However, he did not let go of the dagger. Although the flow of water was strong, it was clear that there was a limit to the amount of water inside. Soon, the flow of water slowed down. Even so, 2 of the people standing on the row of spears were almost swept down. Fortunately, their companions were there to catch them. Shea waited for the flow of water to run out. He immediately scolded, "Ada, you bastard! You almost killed Lao Tzu. Why is there water coming out from inside? I was almost swept down. Ada sneered. Who asked you to be so impatient? You attacked before I even finished speaking. Shea gritted his teeth and finally did not say anything. He quickly climbed into the hole. There was a water trough inside. The water had already run dry. After Shea climbed in, he immediately untied a bundle of rope from his body and threw it down. Climb up along the rope. Hurry up. At the end of the water trough, Shea was the first to climb up after pushing open a metal cover. This place was like a room. The space was very spacious. Behind him, everyone came out from under the metal cover one by one. The place where everyone came out happened to be a water trough. After coming out, the witch doctor lit her magic staff. With the help of the light, everyone could finally see the place clearly. This space was about 10 meters wide. There were conical metal boxes piled up on the ground. Around the corners, there were also circular metal ingots piled up there. Shea could not help but make a strange sound after looking at it for a while. This place, looking at the conical metal boxes and the surrounding metal ingots. This looks like a blacksmith's workshop? Shea took 2 steps forward and lifted up a piece of metal ingot in the corner. It was very heavy, several times heavier than ordinary iron of the same size. Feeling it in his hand, it felt like iron essence? Shea frowned. It's a semi-finished product. Ada walked over. This fellow waved his hand to brush off the stains on his body. He looked at the item in Shea's hand. This is a blacksmith's workshop. It seems I did not miscalculate. This was indeed a blacksmith's workshop. Shea quickly found something that made his eyes red. In the corner of this room, there was a huge metal shelf. On this metal shelf, there were rows and rows of weapons and armor. Clearly, they were all finished products. Shea strode forward and reached out with his hand to grab the weapons. However, before his fingers could make contact with the weapons on the shelf, he had already made contact with a layer of transparent film. This layer of film was hard to detect with the naked eye. Only by reaching out with his hand would he be able to feel it. Shea exerted a little force and pierced through the film. He carefully inspected it. The film's texture was similar to that of leather. However, it was extremely smooth. Additionally, when his fingers made contact with the surface of the film, there was a faint sticky and slippery feeling. It was as though it was some sort of indescribable liquid. Shea's heart thumped, and he reached out with his hand to touch one of the armor. Using his strength, he pulled it down from the shelf and inspected it. He was unable to restrain his joy. It was indeed made of iron essence. The armor was extremely hard. Shea even tried to poke it with his flaming fork. Even though the flaming fork was extremely sharp, without the crimson killing intent, it was only able to leave a mark on the armor. In terms of hardness, it was almost as hard as a dragon's scale. He then grabbed a spear. From its style, it was obviously a spear. However, its length was shorter and thinner than an ordinary spear. Presumably, it was a weapon that the ancient gnomes had made for themselves. With the short stature of the gnomes, this type of weapon was suitable for them. Shea held the spear with both hands and forcefully twisted it. With his strength, even if it was an iron spear, it would still be bent. However, after Shea let out a low shout, the spear made a clear buzzing sound. The shaft of the spear shook slightly, but it did not bend at all. Good stuff. Shea unceremoniously grabbed the spear and inserted it into his lower back and carried it on his back. There were many weapons on the shelf, but most of them were short and small. Shea casually picked up a few large heavy weapons. He grabbed a long-handled axe in his hands. It could only be used as a short-handled axe, and a few spears that he could find were all gathered on his back. Finally, to Shea's delight, he found a shield. This shield was very wide and thick, and when it was erected, it was half his height. It was very heavy, and the edges of the shield were sharpened to a point. Clearly, not only could it be used for defense in close combat, it could also be used to slash the enemy. These were all good stuff. This type of weapon made of iron essence was extremely rare in the present-day continent. Even though there were some iron essence weapons in the collection of the imperial family, they only used a small amount of iron essence to strengthen the edge of the weapon. It was almost impossible to find a weapon made of pure iron essence. However, here, this kind of thing was not valuable and could be found everywhere. Shea immediately looked at the large pile of iron essence ingots in the corner with greedy eyes. If he could bring these things out and find a craftsman, wouldn't he be able to create a large number of top-grade equipment? Don't even think about it. In his mind, Dora mocked, the current human blacksmithing skills are much worse than the ancient gnomes. Don't even mention the fact that you can't transport these things out. Even if you can, you won't be able to make them out. When Shea heard this, he was stunned. Then, he sighed and touched the few iron essence weapons behind him. Alright, to be able to get these, it's not bad. Have you seen enough? If you have, then hurry up and leave. Ada stood in the distance and looked coldly at Shea, who was holding onto the weapons reluctantly. His expression was cold. Don't forget that there's a big guy chasing after us. Shea turned around. Alright. Let's leave this place quickly. The door of the forge was very obvious and was not far away. What made everyone happy was that although the door was closed, it was not made of iron essence. It was a normal stone door. There's nothing strange about it, Ada said calmly. To the gnomes who built this place, this forge was not a particularly important place. Naturally, they didn't need to use iron essence to make the door. According to my estimation, this place must have been guarded by a group of ancient goblins, and this forge was equipped for the guards to replace their weapons when they were worn out. It's not an important place, so naturally, the defense wouldn't be too tight. After a pause, his tone changed. However, according to what I know, there's a problem. He pointed at the stone door. It's not difficult to open this door, but don't forget that the gnomes who built this place were very smart and intelligent. Once an external force forcefully breaks through the door, it will trigger the other defense mechanisms here. I believe you haven't forgotten about the rolling stone bombs in the tunnel. Shea nodded. There won't be any killing mechanisms here, but there will definitely be mechanisms to prevent enemies from entering. Once the door is broken through, according to what I know, he pointed at the back of the door. There's a secret groove behind the door, and a gate will fall down. It will completely seal this place. This backup gate is just in case. That gate is not an ordinary stone door, but a real big guy made of iron essence. Whether its weight or thickness, we can't break through it, so... So what? Shea looked at Ada. How strong are you? Ada looked at Shea. His gaze immediately made the country bumpkin feel uneasy. Shea, what's the most weight you can lift? Shea was speechless. Are you ready? Shea looked back and saw that everyone was standing beside him with a serious expression on their faces. Once I break this door open, everyone immediately rush out as fast as you can. No matter what, don't look back. You must be quick. Quick. Do you understand? The witch doctor repeated Shea's words to everyone in the Zaku language. Everyone nodded solemnly. Then, let's begin. Shea forcefully inserted it into his belt, took a deep breath, raised the fire fork and shouted loudly. In the red light, the fire fork bombarded the stone door. With a loud crash, the stone door shattered. A spacious passageway appeared in front of them. Quick! Shea immediately roared. Everyone ran out like a swarm of bees. But after just one step, they saw that the ceiling above them in the passageway suddenly sank. The speed of the sinking was very fast. The ceiling was originally more than 3 meters high from the ground. Everyone only ran 5 or 6 steps and the ceiling was almost 2 meters high. And this passageway was more than 10 meters long. The most annoying thing was that at the end of the passageway, there was a gate that was slowly falling. At this moment, if Shea was selfish with his physique, if he jumped out with all his strength, a distance of more than 10 meters would be covered in an instant. He could naturally run out alone, but with so many of his companions, he was afraid that they would all be crushed to death here. After running a few steps, Shea's mind was clear as day. Considering the length of the passageway and the speed at which the ceiling was falling, it was impossible for them to run out. By then, he had already run out 1/3 of the passageway. He shouted, "Don't stop! Everyone, run!" After saying that, he stood there with his arms raised, his palms supporting himself on the ceiling. Suddenly, the heavy pressure caused Shea's knees to tremble slightly. The force behind this fall was more than 10,000 jin. Even with Shea's extraordinary strength, he almost knelt down on the spot. He roared like a tiger, and instantly, a crimson killing intent burst out. He took a deep breath and the muscles on his body swelled up, causing his bones to emit caw-caw sounds. Hi! He exhaled and roared, causing the falling momentum to come to a halt. The ceiling was an entire piece. Although it was not made of iron essence, it was something made of pure iron. Shea raised his hand, causing the falling momentum to come to a halt. Everyone took the opportunity to run far away. However, even though the falling ceiling of the passageway had been stopped, the door at the end of the passageway continued to fall. Soon, the Zakas ran out one by one. The witch doctor leaned against the door and shouted at Shea, "Hey! Hurry up and come out! Hurry!" By then, Shea had exhausted all his strength. In just a moment, his eyes had turned crimson red and his body was trembling non-stop. He could not help but feel that his body was getting shorter and shorter, to the point where he could not even straighten his waist. He forced himself to take 2 more steps forward. However, the moment he moved, the falling momentum suddenly came to a halt. Shea exhaled and dared not move anymore. By then, Ada had already reached the door. The door had fallen to a height of 1 meter from the ground. Shea watched as everyone left. Suddenly, his eyes caught sight of Ada, who was leaning against the door. Ada was giving him a strange smile. A terrifying thought flashed through his mind. Ada, he tricked me? He said that after breaking through the door, there would be a door. However, he did not say that there would be a passageway. He also did not say that the entire ceiling of the passageway would fall down. Considering the length of the passageway, there was no way to escape. Thus, he had calculated that I would have to be the one to hold on. However, by doing so, I will not be able to escape. The strange smile on Ada's face made Shea's mind clear. He turned his head and shouted, "Ada!" Ada was squatting outside the door. There was only a distance of 5 to 6 meters between him and Shea. He suddenly sighed and said, "Goodbye, Dora." When this last form of address came out, Shea's whole body suddenly turned ice-cold. Dora? Dora. He actually knows. Dora is hiding here with me. You. Shea had only just opened his mouth when his strength went limp and he was forced to kneel down. Cracking sounds could be heard from his knees as he gritted his teeth and said, "Ada. You. Shea, I do not want to harm you." However, I did not think that Dora would be hiding here with you, Ada sneered. How did you know? Shea's face turned red and his head drooped down. Did you forget? In the snake's lair. Ada harumphed and said, "Before I could say anything, you had already called out the big snake's name, Demandra's. As I recall, I did not say that its name was Demandra's." Shea was enraged. Both his eyes were spitting fire. Suddenly, Shea's entire body fell to the ground, allowing the ceiling to fall. He quickly pulled out a few iron spears that he had plundered from behind him, and quickly stabbed them into the ground. Thankfully, these spears were used by the ancient gnomes and were very short in length. By stabbing them into the ground, they were able to hold up the falling ceiling. If they were slightly longer, they would not be able to hold up the ceiling. Iron essence spears were extremely tough. Instantly, cracking sounds could be heard and the falling ceiling was stopped. Shea quickly crawled forward, but the gate in the distance had already fallen, leaving only less than half a meter. Ada stood at the door and looked at Shea. He shook his head and said, "You will not be able to get out. My calculations are very accurate." Just as he finished speaking, Shea managed to crawl to the sluice gate. The door was only 30 centimeters away from the ground. Shea was still inside the door. Even if he continued to crawl out, he would not be able to make it in time. Suddenly, his face changed and he laughed maniacally. "You damn dragon, how dare you harm Lao Tzu? Die with me." He did not have the time to crawl out. However, he suddenly extended his hand and pulled off the belt on his waist. Then, he flung it out. The belt immediately wrapped around Ada's ankle. Shea laughed maniacally and pulled hard. Shea's strength was so great that Ada was immediately pulled down. As Shea pulled hard, Ada screamed and was dragged into the door by Shea. The falling door almost brushed past the tip of Ada's nose. With a loud bang, the door finally fell to the ground, stirring up a cloud of dust. Outside the door, everyone was completely stunned. The scene just now happened too quickly. The most amazing thing was that Ada, who was lying at the door, spoke to Shea in Byzantium. Most of the Zakus could not understand at all. The only ones who could understand were Todoro and the witch doctor. However, the problem was that Todoro did not stand at the door after crawling out. The witch doctor was there, but she was too shocked to react. Shea suddenly dragged Ada in. When the door fell, everyone was completely stunned. "Ah! What do we do? What do we do?" Todoro suddenly jumped up and shouted crazily. The witch doctor also lost her composure. She suddenly shouted a few times and pounced on the door, pounding it with all her might. Then, she groped around everywhere. Todoro looked panicked. Seeing that Shea was locked inside, the magician's face turned pale and he screamed, "No! We have to find a way to save Master. It's over. If Master dies in there, I'll die even if I go back. Sharba will kill me. Alfracat will kill me. They will all kill me. Even Sir Merlin will kill me." "Merlin! Sir Merlin!" the magician shouted for a while. Suddenly, his voice stopped abruptly. He stood there with a strange expression and his eyes darted around. "Sir Merlin! Almighty Sir Merlin!" The magician suddenly stood there. After muttering a few words, he quickly took out the magic carpet that Merlin had given him. He released the magic carpet, which was the size of a handkerchief. After it had returned to its normal size, Todoro suddenly went crazy and snatched a dagger from the Zaku beside him. He fiercely stabbed and slashed at the magic carpet. With a few slashing sounds, the magic carpet was cut into pieces by him. "Sir Merlin! Sir Merlin!" Todoro's face was filled with madness. The bystanders were dumbfounded. They did not know what this magician was doing. Everyone had seen the benefits of the magic carpet. Yet, they saw Todoro take out this treasure and destroy it in such a crazy manner. The door fell. Although the ceiling of the passageway behind the door was held up by several spears, it would not be able to hold on for long. No matter what, the door had fallen and there was no way out. "You damn dragon, Lao Tzu will kill you first." Shea's face was filled with rage, and he reached out to grab Ada by the throat. Ada did not resist. He simply stared coldly at Shea and allowed Shea to choke him. Suddenly, he sighed and said, "You want to kill me?" Shea's face was filled with killing intent and he said, "You set me up. Why can't I kill you?" Ada's face was cold and he said, "It is very fair. Go ahead and kill me." At that moment, a "ka" sound rang out and one of the spears broke. The force behind the fall was too great, and even the iron spear could not hold on. Seeing that one of the 3 spears had broken, the force behind the fall seemed to be on the verge of collapsing. Shea hesitated for a moment. Then, he abruptly released his grip on Ada's throat and crawled back. After crawling a few steps, he turned around and used his belt to drag Ada over. Another caw-caw sound rang out and there was only one spear left. Shea mustered up the last of his strength and roared loudly. His body was almost close to the ground as he dashed forward 2 meters. Then, he exerted all his strength to roll out of the passage and back to the forging ground inside. He did not stand up. Instead, he quickly pulled his belt and pulled Ada out as well. A loud rumbling sound rang out and the passageway collapsed. The two of them gasped for breath for a moment before Ada sat up and said, "You won't kill me?" Shea harumphed and stared at Ada with a cold gaze. "Killing you is easy, however. Lao Tzu does not want to die here. You know so much about this place. You better think of another way to get out. Otherwise, if I don't tell you, you will kill me right now. If I tell you, you will kill me after I get out. Isn't the end result the same?" Ada's face was filled with disdain. "Even if I can live a little longer, it is still good," Shea gritted his teeth and said. "I will count to 3. If you don't tell me, I will kill you right now. 1, 2. Fine." Ada stood up and patted the dust off his body. There was a calm expression on his face as he said, "You are right. Being able to live a little longer is good. However, I have no other choice." "What?" Shea stood up as well. There was a mocking look on Ada's face as he pointed behind Shea. "Did you forget that we have a companion chasing after us?" Shea turned his head to look. On the other side of the forging ground, a figure was slowly emerging from the opened water tank. A pair of arms reached out and pressed down on the sides of the water tank. Then, a slender body emerged. The fellow jumped out from the water plants and stood there. He twisted his body and his long hair fell down. He combed his hair to reveal a pair of long and pointy ears. The place was dark. However, his eyes were shining with a faint light, illuminating the place. His facial features were sharp and angular, as though they had been perfectly sculpted. The degree of handsomeness of his face was not in any way inferior to that of Ada, who was also a handsome man. Most importantly, this fellow's body gave off a feeling of perfect balance. His slender body seemed to have reached the most perfect proportions. On top of that, he had a handsome face and a pair of pointy ears. "My little prey, we meet again. It seems you fellows are not fast enough." He smiled gently at Shea and Ada. That handsome smile, however, carried with it a trace of viciousness. Shea stared with widened eyes. "You? Demandras?" Demandras slowly walked over. "Oh, you just realized it? Pitiful and lowly creature. What you are seeing now is my third form, an elf. I did not update yesterday. Today's extended chapter can be considered as homework, by the way. Please vote, to be continued. If you want to know what will happen next, please go to www.chidian.com. There are more chapters. Support the author. Support the original reading. You're tuning in to the Phoenix Nights YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.